Coming in last on the list is the Smiths' self-titled debut, The Smiths. I feel kind of bad for placing the self-titled debut album of The Smiths last. Because, well, if you're a Smiths fan, which I assume you are from clicking this video, you'd know that it is a very difficult task to rank the 4 studio albums of The Smiths in order, because the quality of the songs on each album is just absolutely incredible. The songwriting of The Smiths is so good that their singles and B-side compilations are just as essential as any studio album. There really aren't that many bands that you can make the same claim for. In fact, in their entire discography, I'd say I only really dislike one song, which is the obvious case for everyone. So because of this, it feels really wrong to say that their worst album is The Smiths, because quite frankly, it's just a brilliant debut. But one album has to come last, and when your competition is these 3 albums, unfortunately the self-titled debut has to be at the bottom. This is due to some issues I have with the album, which I will delve into later. But for now, let's talk about the nearly 40-year-old album from the beginning, starting with the first song on the album and then going song by song in the order of the tracklist. So, the album kicks off with Reel Around the Fountain. It's a slow-paced song that is seemingly about a relationship between someone who is older or more experienced and a younger or inexperienced person. This is where I get spoilt for choice when talking about the Smiths. There is so much to love about their music, so what do I talk about first? Should I start with Morrissey's incredible vocals and his sharp and witty lyrics? What about Johnny Marr's mesmerizing guitar work? Or Andy Rourke's catchy bass lines? I think I'll start with the first instrument you hear on the album, which is the drums performed by Mike Joyce. Mike is playing a simple beat on a snare, kick and hi-hat. It's standard stuff, it's not very complex, but the snare drum has this long reverb on it compared to the hi-hat and the kick drum. And this reverberated drum will stick out throughout the entire track. It sounds almost artificial because of this effect, but it fills in the open space where you can hear the reverb spread out across your headphones. Because there are no other instruments playing, we can clearly hear everything in the drums. There is something about a flat, long reverberated snare hit that just changes the atmosphere of any song to just be melancholic and moody. You'll see me mention this snare sound later on, as they do it quite a few times. But I've also heard this technique used on other songs by other bands too. One that floats in my head right now is Decades by Joy Division. This isolated drum sound just sets you up for this moody vibe perfectly. So, from this simple sound alone, we know the song is going to be a little somber. And then, instead of coming into the track one by one, the rest of the band, including Morrissey, comes straight into the song with little to no build-up, filling up this empty space left by the drums instantly, with just this wall of sound. You can still hear that reverb on the drums poke through, but it's much more subdued now with the rest of the instrumentation added into the mix. And it is an example of Mike Joyce's ability to create a drum beat to hook you in, as well as serving as a great solid groundwork for Morrissey, Marr and Andy to play over. Now let's talk about Mike Joyce. Mike is often an overlooked part of the Smiths. I'm not going to say he is as important to the Smiths' sound and image as Morrissey or Marr, but there are songs where I believe the drumming is the best part of the song, such as in The Queen is Dead. He can be extremely versatile. The Queen is Dead illustrates his energy and his pace, playing fast and aggressive, which takes a lot of stamina to do. So to play this aggressively does take a lot of work, especially when you need to keep in time too. He also has some creative and unique fills, like on the song This Night Has Opened My Eyes. It just wouldn't be the same without his ride and crash hits on this breakdown. Same with Rush Home Ruffians. And his overall ability to roll with the Smiths and Mars' changes in genre, going from rockabilly, alt-rock and indie rock to slow love jams inspired by the 50s. It takes a lot of effort to do that and keep up with the punches. He doesn't nick the spotlight either. I'm honestly not sure many could with Morrissey in the band, but he always has great fills and he serves each song he plays on exceptionally well. I have never had an issue with the drumming in any Smith song. Now I've spoken about the drums, well, what do I talk about next? Let's start with Morrissey, the frontman of the group. His voice is, well, it's iconic at this point, and it is very, very recognisable. You hear Morrissey, you know it's him. His voice is just so distinct and unique, and it appears fully formed on this debut album. There is no shakiness in his performance on this track, or any other on the album actually. His deep, baritone voice is strong and prominent throughout the entire The Smiths debut, and it's just as strong in the other Smiths albums too. He emerged with the Smiths just fully confident. One of the best features of Morrissey is his ability to completely submerge himself into the subject of a song. The vulnerability of a school kid being bullied by the headmaster, a hopeless romantic begging for affection, or a sarcastic and arrogant pop star wanting money and fame. He acts out these roles, he doesn't just sing them, if that makes sense. And through vocal inflections, tone of voice and cadence, he adds so much character and personality to the songs that he sings to really sell these characters. Grunting and growling for the angry and bitter protagonists, high-pitched wails for the weaker and struggling souls, or a stoic groan for a man broken by the town around him. Through his lyrics as well, he always adds complexities to these characters. They aren't always black and white portrayals. He can sing a song about taking down those in power, and then in the twist of a word or a way he sings a word, he can change the entire meaning of a song to that of a rotten man trying to get himself into power. His vocal range may not be the widest, but his performances are so expressive he really doesn't need a big range to deliver a plethora of emotions. And in Reel Around the Fountain specifically, his cadence in the intro just sounds disinterested. Perhaps more fittingly, it sounds tired and worn. It gets across the character of someone reluctantly knowing what someone did and asking them to fess up. It's time the tale were told of how you took a child and you made him old. I imagine from my description of the song in the intro and the lyrics here, some eyebrows might have raised up for people unfamiliar with the Smiths. The lyrics may seem very dodgy, and that's another thing you have to bring up when you talk about Morrissey. His lyrics. And it is extremely fitting for Morrissey that the first song on his first ever debut was just inviting controversy. The music press alleged that the song was about an adult in a relationship with someone underaged. And glancing at the lyrics, you can see how the music press arrived at this conclusion, especially after looking at some of the lyrics later on in the song. And actually, I first interpreted this song to be like the Police song, Don't Stand So Close to Me, but from the student's side instead. The student wanted the teacher, fantasized about them, but despite longing for this relationship, take me to the haven of your bed was something that you never said. It was a completely one-sided crush, just a student's longing for an adult or a teacher. However, my interpretation isn't too correct either by what Morrissey has stated. Morrissey, with some annoyance, has stated that this was not the case, and it was in fact about a general loss of innocence, not related to age, and I do believe Morrissey here. As you will see as we delve into the rest of the album, many songs deal with the theme of the loss of innocence. In a broader sense, you don't have to be a child to lose a sense of innocence, but someone who is innocent can be described as a child, if that makes sense. In the same way you can insult an adult by calling them a child. I still think my interpretation works still, and to be honest, I think the press's interpretation of this song works well too, even if Morrissey did not intend it. For my interpretation, the loss of innocence that Morrissey is speaking about, it is not good, especially when accompanied by the sad and somber music from Johnny and the rest of the band. When talking about the Smiths on their debut album, all of this is very morbid already. The lyrics are not very happy and are quite dour, and Morrissey is seen as a bit of a miserable git. And the Smiths in general are seen to be just a bunch of mopey teenagers making music for other depressed teens. I can see where this view comes from, especially when you look into Reel Around the Fountain and other more morbid songs on their compilations like Asleep, but I do believe Morrissey and the Smiths just do not get enough credit for their humorous side. Morrissey has a very sarcastic and dry sense of humour that comes out at just the strangest times. And despite the subject matter of Reel Around the Fountain being quite dour, there is a handful of comedic lines that Morrissey has just sprinkled in there. People said you were virtually dead, and they were so wrong. This verse is very supportive. It's basically the older character, or more experienced character, saying to the younger character to not allow what others say to put you down. You know, a chin-up attitude, don't let them get you down. And this older character seems very supportive of this person. It seems kind of wholesome if it wasn't for this weird dynamic of experience being brought into the mix. But then in the next verse, Morrissey says this instead. There is something just so funny about this supposed supportive character just being extremely frank whilst trying to support someone who is clearly lonely. No, don't listen to them. Come on, you're not virtually dead. Or easily led. Well, okay, mate, yeah, fair enough. I mean, I can see where they're coming from. Morrissey just finds a way to add this odd humour to these dour-sounding songs, and for the most part, they always mesh well. I could see it for this exploitive, experienced character too. I could see them saying something along these lines. It just fits this narrative well. Only Morrissey could get away with those lyrics, and again, it is all in his delivery. A fantastic lyricist and singer who knows how to wield his words. Now, let's talk about Johnny Marr, often regarded as one of the best guitarists out there, for finding his own complex style that is very pleasant sounding, but incredibly difficult to replicate. For the guitarists out there who like the Smiths, I imagine when you first heard the Smiths, let's say the song This Charming Man, you instantly thought, oh my god, I have to learn that right now. Then you pick up the guitar and have a look at the tab and you go, what the bloody hell is he doing? How the hell is he doing that? He just has this very odd playing style revolving around loads of arpeggios at breakneck speeds that is very difficult to replicate. So the strain you'll feel in your hand when playing songs like the mentioned This Charming Man goes to show how difficult his playing style really is to replicate. But even after practicing and actually learning how to play, you'll wonder how on earth did he just write this? It's so finicky to play and requires so much moving just up and down the fretboard constantly. Along with playing all of these fast arpeggios, it's difficult. But Johnny's playing is so unique because he uses limitations.
Pare down, get rid of, and then just find out what you're left with, and then do something within those sort of narrow constraints. Long solos are out, distortion was out really.
He doesn't use power chords, he hardly uses solos. And even when playing simple chords, he'll usually just add a lick in there or an extra note, just for some extra variety and to make it sound just that little bit more odd. And even the effects pedals he uses aren't the usual ones for rock music. I don't really remember if he's ever used a distortion pedal before. You can definitely hear an overdrive in his sound along with his chorus and flanger and tremolo, but I cannot hear any fuzz or distortion. His playing is just never straightforward. Even his strumming style has a lot of variety from it, pulling from different genres, like funk, disco, and even rockabilly in some songs, which we'll discuss later. All of his different play styles and influences, as well as the limitations he puts on himself, forces him to write in uncommon song structures and tones, which you'll notice in the entire discography of the Smiths. Even in Reel Around the Fountain, the notes he is playing is not your usual indie rock guitar playing. Maybe indie rock right now might sound a little bit like this, but that is probably because they were influenced by Johnny Marr. In the 80s, there was nothing like Johnny. And these are all the reasons why he is seen as one of the greatest. You know, I actually considered including him on my underrated guitarists list, but to be completely honest, I think he gets his dues. And the Smiths increasing in popularity over the years to be more popular now than when they disbanded in the 80s is proof of that. I mean, I wasn't even alive when the band disbanded, and he's one of my favourite guitarists. So anyways, you put one of the greatest lyricists and singers of the 80s with one of the greatest guitar players of the 80s in their songwriting prime with a new sound, it's a no-brainer that the Smiths' work is of this high quality. However, there are 4 members in the Smiths, and the contributions of Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce do go a little unnoticed, I believe. Especially Andy. And I would argue that Andy's bass lines are just as essential to the Smiths' sound as Johnny's riffs or Morrissey's voice and lyrics. In this song Reel Around the Fountain, the bass is doing its own thing, separate from following the guitar, which is what you'll usually see in some indie bands. And Andy does this on every single song. He never follows Johnny Marr, and he is just so great at finding this perfect balance between filling in the gaps in the song that require the bass line and adding in his own style whilst not going too mental and playing as much as possible to try and steal the limelight. It is a bass guitar, it's supposed to keep time along with the drums, so the guitar and vocals can just do their own thing. But again, within these limitations, Andy can get a lot of notes and sound out of these small sections. He has a very controlled playing style, often with sudden stops and palm mutes and plucks, to really poke out of the mix with a pronounced twang. You can hear it in the refrain here in Reel Around the Fountain. It sticks out in a good way and helps punctuate the rest of the song. I really think he is one of the most underrated bass guitarists for how many amazing riffs he's created. You'll see plenty of examples of his amazing bass lines that just sound so good for lack of any analytical terms. Usually as a bassist, you just follow the root note, but Andy just adds in these other notes, these little small variations here and there, or maybe a little small bass run, or maybe a hammer on here or there too. He should not be overlooked when talking about the Smiths sound. One of the best things about the Smiths is that every instrument is so well formed. Focus on the bass and Andy is playing this catchy riff. Johnny Marr is, well, Johnny Marr. And Morrissey, love him or hate him, is a commanding presence and anything but boring. And then there is Mike, which, whilst not playing like Neil Peart, keeps a steady beat, and like a drummer should, he keeps the band in time. Much in the same way Ringo kind of gets seen as the weak link of the Beatles when he does his job perfectly well, I feel like Mike does the same purpose here. I've never really been taken out of a song because of the drumming, and in fact, some of his drum work later on is some of the standouts in the track. Reel Around the Fountain is a fantastic song and an amazing introduction to the Smiths, illustrating the purpose of each of the 4 band members perfectly and showing their unique sound when they're all playing together. It's everything the Smiths are great at. The odd structure, Morrissey's sarcastic and somber lyrics, Andy's catchy bass and Mike's solid drumming, and Johnny Marr being Johnny Marr. I love Reel Around the Fountain and I love the Smiths' debut. But before I get into the rest of the songs in the album, I'd just like to state now why it is ranked last. Despite being incredible with its songwriting, the production and the actual sound of the album is a little flat. Just listening to it, it sounds good, it's serviceable, but something has always bothered me about the production, and when comparing the album version of Reel Around the Fountain to the John Peel sessions, I think I know what was bothering me. The album The Smiths just sounds too clean and too in the high end. Plus, it feels like it's lacking an edge, which the Smiths should most definitely have. Just listen to the John Peel version of Reel Around the Fountain and focus on Johnny's guitar. It's very rough, it's got this overdrive to it, it's got this grit that is noticeably missing from the album. Of course it's live, so it's more rough, you can't refine as much. But that overdrive and cutting sound on Johnny's amp, which adds some excitement, some edge, is just gone from the album. And so this isn't down to Johnny's playing, but his guitar sounds pretty weak and tinny compared to the Peel sessions. And then there's the biggest casualty of the album, Andy's bass. It sounds so subdued on this album compared to the Peel sessions, and as confirmed by future Smiths albums, this was a big mistake. Reel Around the Fountain, you can hear it in the background, but just listen to the Peel session. It's got this jumpy vibe to it that is just missing from the album. There are a few tracks which we'll come to where it's a bit more pronounced, but then there are others where it's so hard to hear compared to the rest of the noise. And then that goes into another aspect of the album, that it's not just the mixing, it's the actual volume of some of the instruments. Sometimes the vocals or drums are just way too loud and the bass and guitar just feel like background noise. Overall, production and mixing on this album could have had a second pass, and the more I listen to the Smiths' later records, the more the production of this record sours it overall for me. This production work and mixing does not spoil the album. It's still a perfect starting point for anyone who wants to get into the Smiths, but it just hasn't got that last lick of paint that the rest of the Smiths albums do have to make them truly shine on a recording. Okay, I know it's been like, 10 or 20 minutes, and I haven't even gotten off the first song yet. I suppose it serves me right for trying to be unique and trying to do an album ranking without an intro, but at least I've got the groundwork of what all of the individuals of the Smiths do, and so now I can just go track by track on each of the albums without spending too much time analysing too much of the band members. Now I can just focus on the songs, so it'll just be song by song. Which means we now get to go on to track 2. Finally, You've Got Everything Now. This song is far more fast-paced than Reel Around the Fountain, switching the vibe of the album from slow and moody to fast and swift. It starts with some nice interplay and collaboration between Johnny and Andy, and it highlights both of their contributions. There are sudden stops and changes reminiscent of funk music that are standouts in this song here. That intro riff is just catchy, and it stays catchy throughout the entire song. There are some acoustic guitars that come in for the chorus or hook, and they just give this feeling of opening up. And just as the instruments are opening up on this hook or chorus, Morrissey opens up a little bit more too.
No, I've never had a job because I've never wanted one.
The lyrics on this song seem to talk about old childhood friends, and Morrissey plays the special child who always succeeded over the other friend when younger at everything. Back at the old grey school, I would win and you would lose. He has nothing to show for it, and his friend has everything. Seems like a very simple song subject, about someone regretting how they acted in school, or maybe not living up to their true potential for numerous reasons, whilst their friend succeeded in their hardships. But Morrissey just adds this extra complexity to it. As in his lyrics we can see that despite the friend getting everything now, he still isn't happy, making the outlook of both of these friends a bit more muddy. Who is rich and who is poor, I cannot say. Who is rich? Are any of them rich? Who is poor? Are they both poor? He's not talking about money, it's talking about more to life. It's very complex and grey, but it's very easy to read, and it goes to show how Morrissey can consider things that maybe aren't sung about too much, which is why so many teens in the 80s and even now relate to his music still. Morrissey again on this song is just so strong vocally. It's also the first time we get to hear his falsetto, which I'm honestly pretty mixed on. The falsetto goes pretty well when accompanied straight away after his deep baritone voice. And it's an interesting switch that kind of adds this extra vulnerability to his voice. But sometimes he uses it just way too much on certain songs, and you'll see on the next song actually, he uses it way too much and it just becomes grating and quite frankly annoying. Before we get ahead of ourselves though, let's focus more on You've Got Everything Now. Johnny at the end is playing some really nice guitar work, but unfortunately, it is a little buried under the rest of the instrumentation, which is unfortunately an issue on the entire album, but overall it is a solid song, which shows the other side of the Smiths. It shows the fast and upbeat side of them, despite talking about some sad subject matters and grey areas. So we've started off with a slow-paced song, Reel Around the Fountain, and then we've just had the very fast track, You've Got Everything Now. And now we have the third track, which is Miserable Lie, which tries to combine these two aspects of the Smiths, and it does this with mixed results. It starts with some very sweet arpeggios from Johnny. God, I'm going to have to find a different way to say that because that phrase is probably going to be uttered a lot by me in this review. Anyways, his guitar playing and the drums and bass keep a nice slow pace. It just creates this chilled atmosphere, and it's not too fast or active. It's very slow paced and it's just chilled out, which allows Morrissey to just croon over it. Then after this very chilled out vibe, it is instantly smashed by the fast paced section, and the drums particularly become a lot louder and thundering. Johnny also plays far more aggressively here too, and Andy goes just mad on the bass. It sounds pretty difficult what he's playing. Then Johnny brings in a solo, and I don't know why I get this association, but sometimes the twang and tone of Johnny's guitar, it just reminds me of an American Western. It could be the type of echo, I think it's slapback on his guitar, which may be the rockabilly influence, and maybe some of the records that he was fond of in the 50s. It's definitely an odd sound when compared with this jangly indie rock sound that he created, but it's another defining part of his playing, just dipping into numerous styles which will continue to happen throughout the rest of the Smiths' career. And Morrissey just only uses his falsetto for the rest of the track, and it does get very obnoxious. Which is a shame because Johnny's just doing some amazing guitar work on this track, but Morrissey's falsetto just doesn't sound good on this song. I think his falsetto is just better suited sparingly, which he would do later on in the Smiths' discography. This is the album where this falsetto appears the most. He calmed down a lot on the future records. After this is Pretty Girls Make Graves, which is an underrated and musically diverse song, with some very fun ideas from Johnny on the guitar. The song has some acoustic guitars which are panned left and right. This is a common production technique in pop music. It makes the acoustic guitars just sound bigger and brighter without muddying the middle of the mix. And then this is usually accompanied by an electric guitar playing a main riff throughout the entire song. But Johnny doesn't do this, at least not straight away. He always does something different to add this new flavour to a song. There is no electric guitar in the intro, which gives it this odd space and it allows the bass to shine. And Andy Rourke's bass is just so catchy. Just listen to it, just bounce over the intro. But whilst the bass is the main instrument in this song, all of a sudden in the second verse you hear a little bit of playing from Johnny. It's very subtle, but just listen to it. He's playing a little 3-note phrase. And then on the third verse he adds upon this sound, playing this really nice arpeggiated phrase that just jangles through the track. And on top of this arpeggiated phrase, you can still hear that 3-note da-da-dun in the background. It is very subtle, and to be honest, I don't think the mixing or production is helping it, but it is definitely still there. So what seemed like a very simple song at first shows this build-up from Johnny. And he goes even further on this, starting with the verse after this, where he adds this stabby, funk-type strumming.
I could have been wild and I could have been free.
And again, that same 3-note dun is still there, along with the arpeggiated phrase that he added second. But I just love that Johnny just adds these little phrases that just keeps the song interesting and fresh throughout its entire runtime. It allows the bass to just continue playing this catchy phrase over and over and over again, because it won't get repetitive, because the guitar is just doing so much in the background that can just keep your attention. Just some great use of overdubs and just amazing guitar work. As Johnny adds more and more upon these verses, so is Morrissey, as the narrative that he is singing about gets more interesting and intense as it goes through these different changes. Morrissey is playing a timid man being pressured into a relationship, or perhaps something else, by a girl. The girl is trying to seduce him, trying to get him to give in to lust, give up to lust. And so on a song like this, you'd probably think it would be about a man scorned by a woman as the person gives in to his lust. But remember, this is Morrissey that we're talking about here. The nature of the person Morrissey is playing is introverted and shy. Nature played a trick on him. He could have been wild and he could have been free, but he's just not got that in him. And so he rejects the girl, and the girl instantly leaves him and finds someone on the beach instead. And then this is when you'd think that the man would be very upset by this. And whilst it does go down that route, the way Morrissey tells it just adds this strange humour to the mix again. And on the sand, another man who takes her hand. A smile lights up that stupid face, oh well it would. Just that snide remark, a smile lights up that stupid face, oh well it would. The addition of oh well it would is so catty and flippant. It's almost like the man is just trying to get the last laugh in this situation. And when you think of the song as a whole, it's like a retelling of a classic rock song with someone hooking up with a groupie. But instead, it is Morrissey which just changes the story completely to this one instead. Morrissey definitely goes against these rock archetypes and stereotypes a lot, much in the same way Ma did with his guitar. So the lyrics and music sort of complement each other. I'd also like to point out that in the breakdown, where the bass and guitar just kind of melt away down into the lower sections of their instruments, Morrissey continues to go into the higher range with his falsetto. And I think this is a perfect example of his falsetto. It works well in small doses, and again with the bass and guitar going lower into the range of their instruments, it really does make his vocals stand out. And that bass slowly sliding down into its lower range is just so nice because there's this little buzz to it. It brings back a little bit of that edge that I think was missing from the live performances of these songs on the Peel sessions. The ending is really nice too. It kind of comes out of nowhere and almost becomes a little bit more somber and spaced out. Interestingly, the song ends with Morrissey singing the intro lyrics to Hand in Glove, which would link the characters almost, so maybe there's a reason why this man isn't giving in to lust. Maybe he's just not interested in her. I suppose we'll have to find out when we go through Hand in Glove. But as the lyrics end this song off, it means the next song is The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Yeah, I'm still not exactly sure why they ended the song with Hand in Glove. Maybe they were close originally in the track list. Could be a million reasons why. I couldn't find a concrete reason. Anyway, on to The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Johnny plays another great jangly riff, which rarely changes through the entire 5-minute runtime of the song. The acoustic guitars are back too, panned left and right, although this time they feel a bit more prominent. And just like Pretty Girls Make Graves, he again adds on to each verse as the song goes on. Originally when I was listening to the song, I kind of got bored of the sound because I just thought it was the same bass and guitar over and over and over again for 5 minutes. But then when reviewing the song, I just paid attention to what Johnny was playing, and he is adding on overdubs in every single verse. And then as the 4th minute rolls around, he is still adding stuff to the song. Just listening to the song 5 minutes in versus 1 minute in, you can just hear all this empty space that Johnny has coloured in with his colourful guitar playing. So these 5-minute songs are just blissful to listen to as Johnny just adds so much. So much little detail just tucked into the back, which again is a shame because the production doesn't really make it apparent that he is making all these little additions. The music serves as a great background for Morrissey as he sings this story of what I interpret to be a single father raising his son alone after his mother never knew him, maybe dying in childbirth probably. It talks about the strength of a father and his willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of the child, facing all horrors of the world that may come for him. It's a really melancholic sounding song with a really wholesome meaning and centre. Morrissey's wordplay is also effortless. He has just so many ways to describe a simple situation in such poetic ways, and this is just a perfect example of that. As long as the hand that rocks the cradle is mine. It's not too ambiguous that you have no idea what he's saying. It's just really nice to have a song like this. It's quite calming to me. Again, this is just an interpretation. Maybe I'll find out that Morrissey meant, oh no, the guy actually murdered his wife and now he's trying to take ownership over his son. And it could be seen as an overprotective parent and being way too controlling, similar to Mother from Pink Floyd's The Wall. This suits the theme as well as the taking away of innocence that this album has delved into, but I like to choose my happy interpretation. I think it's nice to have happy songs mixed in with these dour subjects. It just gives the Smiths' debut this variety as dealing with the innocence of youth and the loss of innocence. A father just looking over his child to protect him is just very innocent. So, let's speak about this charming man. Everything about this charming man is just executed perfectly. The iconic riff by Johnny introducing the song is astounding. And just the mind needed to create such a song that goes up and down the fretboard like this to make this riff, it's just mind-boggling. He really is a wizard. His guitar is far more jangly here. This sound pretty much created an entire genre. Jangly guitar, fast upbeat drums, and a bass line that's just as prominent as the guitar, and artistic poems just talking about the strange parts of life. The production work on this song does sound a lot clearer. Johnny's guitar isn't just in the middle and then the reverb is panned left or right, and it isn't as thin as it was on previous songs too. The guitar itself is actually double-tracked and panned left and right. It sounds so much more full in its tone compared to other songs like on Reel Around the Fountain. It is still a little muddy. The bass and drums do clash a bit, especially with Morrissey's baritone and low vocals. But it's not as bad as some other songs on this album, especially one which we'll come to later, which is the worst mixing job out of all of them. The song subject that this goes into is really unique too. Again, I should state that I am not the best with lyrics, so my interpretation will more than likely be a little off. But to me, the first time I heard this song, it felt like a general song about just letting others take the wheel for you. Why pamper life's complexities when the lever runs smooth on the passenger seat? Why think about all these deep philosophical things when just being a passenger in life is just far more easier? And for me, this song is about this attitude. Quite like the song The Passenger by Iggy Pop, it kind of deals with the same thing, I thought. And this charming man was more metaphorical. It wasn't literally a charming man. It's just this idea of letting life take the wheel, and this charming man is just a metaphor, he's not a literal person. Although through my analysis whilst making this video, and looking at the other themes like sexuality in this album, it is far more likely that this actually is a small story about a charming man who helps Morrissey with a ride when his bike is punctured. And he sort of gives him some advice, and there is some subtle flirting in there. And then Return the Ring might be the older charming man giving advice to the younger man, telling him not to rush into things like marriage when he is so young. Either way, this all links into the album too. It's about this looming adulthood, spoiling the carefree attitude we have when we are younger. There is definitely some flirting in there too, and it just shows how much Morrissey just packs into these themes. I find myself just getting lost in interpretations that were completely different from what he intended, which is always fun to do. Often he described working class England in the 80s to be drab and lifeless, and other times he can make this working class England just pop, romanticizing it and making it seem like the most idyllic setting he can, all through his word choices and how he chooses to tell certain stories. On a bike with a flat tyre, lost on your own in the middle of nowhere, isn't very glamorous. However, punctured bicycle on a hillside, desolate. This seems far more poetic and imaginative. Along with the cheery, bright music of the Smiths, it sells this vision of a picturesque encounter with a charming man wonderfully well. And to the point, it paints a clear picture of the setting in few words. I can see though that a lot of people would probably hate this lyrical style. Some see it as wordy and pretentious, especially with all of the literary and film references that Morrissey packs into his songs. But the thing is about Morrissey is that these lyrics are who he is. When singing a song, there has to be some authenticity and feeling to the song. Whether you're making a song about partying like it's 1999, or a man on death row waiting to die, there has to be something in there that makes it sound like you believe what you are saying. And this is done through the vocals. You don't have to be a wordy Oscar Wilde scholar to make songs like The Smiths or to sing like Morrissey, but you have to sing it in a way that sells the song. It's more than just hitting the notes. And as mentioned in my intro, the way that Morrissey uses his cadence on songs like this sells him and makes him believable in this role. If Liam Gallagher sang "Punctured Bicycle on a Hillside Desolate," no one is buying this portrayal by the bloke who wears an anorak and keeps his arms behind his back whilst belting out cigarettes and alcohol. Much in the same way, no one is buying Morrissey singing cigarettes and alcohol. Morrissey's voice suits these lyrics. There isn't that dissonance that you sometimes get. You know, when you hear a song on the radio and they're speaking about love or whatever, and it just feels emotionless. Honestly, I thought this was just going to be a quick sentence about how Morrissey is very, very good at encapsulating the characters that he portrays. But the more I think about it, this is quite a difficult subject to delve into when looking across the entire spectrum of music. So I'm just going to move on. And next is another favourite of mine, Still Ill. I love the reversed, repeated snare sound in the intro. It just creates such a ghostly sound. It just sounds really cool. It also continues throughout the track, although it is toned down a lot in the verses, so it doesn't just overtake the entire song and destroy Morrissey's vocals. It stands out when it needs to, and it isn't overbearing. When the snare is making this noise, Johnny is also playing these muted hits, chugging along with this same rhythm, and it just kind of adds on to it to make it a bigger sound. And it really does hype up the intro of the song. And the actual main riff by Johnny is just another standout. Johnny is just so good at coming up with these arpeggiated and complex sections and then fitting them into this pop sound. Also, to help this jangly sound that Johnny Marr goes for, there is also an acoustic guitar buried in this mix. The high end from the acoustic guitar makes it just ring out a little more to just make this jangly sound. The bass is particularly complex in this song too. Not necessarily in the playing style, but it is just such a fast performance by Andy, quickly moving up and down his bass, especially in the breakdown, and sliding in hammer-ons at a fast pace. It sounds horrific to play, but it's such a nice melody that just climbs up and down, working in sync with the guitar. A highlight is this mentioned breakdown and chorus, and it becomes a more somber song in this section and more moody, with Morrissey just groaning about being still ill. Morrissey seems to be playing a teen who is coming to terms with his thoughts and just his general feeling about the current world and his place in it. And so the lyrics are scrambled, talking about relationships that have soured, leaving sore lips, reflecting on old days, more existential questioning, and how his life is just not like the old days when he was younger. He fits in about 5 different topics within like one verse. It is just scattered. And then the simple chorus, "Am I still ill?" It feels like him saying this is him realizing that all these years of being an afflicted and depressed teen are still with him in his adulthood. But even in this misery and self-pity, there is some hope to this song and to this character. I get this from the line, "For there are brighter sides to life, and I should know because I've seen them, but not very often." It goes to show that this person isn't just completely blinded by their own self-pity. They can see there is good in the world, but to them, it just isn't a thing that happens very often. And I imagine a lot of teens and young adults probably related to this section quite a bit. Especially during the 80s, where there really wasn't anything like this, songwriting-wise. It's another example of Morrissey just adding in a little bit more seasoning into the song. It's not about a blindly depressed teen, he does realise his situation. Anyways, it's a fantastic song that leads perfectly into Hand in Glove. I haven't spoken much about the transitions or the flow of this album track to track, but this is a specific example where the transition just works so well. Still Ill ends with the same reversed and repeated drum track, whilst Johnny plays these muted notes. But it ends with this last 2-hit section, with Johnny strumming 2 hits on his acoustic guitar, Andy playing his final 2 bass notes, and Mike just hitting the snare 1-2. The first thing we hear in Hand in Glove is this loud snare. It keeps the same mood from Still Ill, and it could be linked if it wasn't for this silence in between the tracks. Lyrically, the song is about a relationship Morrissey has with someone the public might see as undesirable, with people staring and laughing. Originally, I thought this was about class divide. Yes, we may be hidden by rags, but we've something they'll never have. Their love is real and pure despite their class. Sort of sticking their chest out and being proud of this working class background, dismissing others who would judge them for it. Also, due to a misheard lyric, I thought it summed up the naivete of first relationships. No, it's not like any other love. This one is different because it's ours. Sarcastically poking fun at 2 people who proclaim their love is unique from others, and nothing will ever break it. However, this was misheard by me. It is actually, this one is different because it's us. My interpretation can still work with the use of the word us, but upon reflection of the other lyrics and the use of us, this is most likely a song about a same-sex relationship. That explains why it is different. This would be unique enough for the 80s, to have this pro-gay song be just so upfront, even if I did miss the interpretation originally. However, Morrissey adds in this self-destructive twist at the end, which undercuts this positive and proud attitude the song had. I know my luck too well, and I'll probably never see you again. Ultimately, the person is not optimistic about their situation, and succumbs to the fact that this won't work out well. Morrissey has always been very vague about his sexuality, and never definitive about it. Sometimes he is celibate in songs like Pretty Girls Make Graves. Sometimes he's very vulgar, like in I Want the One I Can't Have. Straight in songs like Girlfriend in a Coma, and gay in songs like Hand in Glove. His ability to remain vague on his sexuality allows him to slip into these subjects and inherit these characters that may or may not agree with his actual preference. And this also allows others to form their own conclusions on the songs. If he was more direct, I wouldn't have been able to come to my own interpretation that this song here that we're talking about, Hand in Glove, is about class divide. I don't see this as a pro or a con objectively. In fact, I can see this actually rubbing quite a few people the wrong way. But personally, I love it when songs give me a little leeway to think about my own interpretations, rather than subjects that are just set in stone. It's a personal preference, but it's why I gravitate towards the Smiths' lyrics. Depending on the day or what lyric I look at, the entire song subject can be changed for me. And that's always really fun, just finding new interpretations 10 years after I first started listening to them. Back onto the music, it sounds kind of cheery, especially with the harmonica just kind of slowly making its way into the track, just covered in reverb. And it comes back every so often as well to reintroduce the verses after the breakdowns. It hasn't got a traditional chorus in this song, and all it consists of is this repeating verse and this breakdown section with the mentioned harmonica. I love the structure of this song and how after every 4 bars it always ends with this 2-strum hit, which is what ended Still Ill, which is why I think these songs work so well together. And in these little stops, it allows the silence to come back into the track. And I've explained on quite a few songs now that this silence is always great in music, because it's pretty much an empty palette. You can start to build up from zero again and make the listener pay attention to new sounds. Plus, it adds more of an effect when they bounce back onto the track, because there's nothing in the mix previously or nothing clogging it up. The mixing of this song does unfortunately let it down a bit too. Johnny's guitar is just too muddy in the breakdown, just in the sections before the harmonica. Unfortunately, the mixing and production does continue to be an issue for me. And the next track definitely is my least favourite production-wise. What Difference Does It Make starts out really well with a reversed, slowed down guitar slowly leading us into the main riff of the actual song, which is one of Johnny's catchiest. It really gets into your head, that lick. I can hear it repeating in my head right now as I am reading off this script. The tone of it is far more deeper than what the tone of Johnny's guitar was on other songs, which usually was quite thin and tinny. Here it's pretty full. I don't know if it's because maybe he's playing on the top strings rather than with a capo on. I might have to fact check myself there. He might be playing with a capo right now. But it sounds a lot fuller, the sound. It sounds thicker. Looking at the footage of this live performance, looks like I was right. No capo. This is also punctuated by some acoustic chord strums, which Johnny does this quite a bit on a few songs, as I've mentioned. He just kind of uses it for extra effect at the end of each phrase of his riff. Morrissey has some reverb on his voice, and it sounds like he's speaking through a PA system, which makes sense because it sounds like the song is about Morrissey shouting to the world about who he really is. All men have secrets and here is mine. It's quite simply about someone revealing themselves to the world or to a friend, and then the friend or world just rejecting them, being ashamed of them. However, this doesn't keep this person down. He still loves the other person. But now you know the truth about me. You won't see me anymore. Well, I'm still fond of you. Ahaha. Instead of taking the moral high ground in the situation, or avoiding the person outright, or just disowning them for disowning you, it's like he can't help himself. He has to have this one-up and always get the last laugh. Everything is changed by that last ahaha at the end. It's a gotcha moment. You disowned me just because of what I am. But I'll still love you, not because of the goodness out of my heart. No, just to spite you. It's another example of the Smiths and Morrissey's humour, just being very catty and facetious in situations that probably deserve a lot of serious care. Or it could be seen as much sadder, as this catty and sarcastic manner is hiding a deep hurt. Both interpretations I've came to, and I like the idea of both of them. So I like the lyrics, I love the guitar of Johnny, and the drums are really nice too. They sound really spaced out with the reverb. They're very 80s. But one absolutely massive issue of the song is that the bass is just so low in the mix. And with such a great bass line from Andy, it's just so annoying and frustrating to have it just relegated to be in the background and just having this tiny little sound that you can hardly make out. Just listen to it in the Peel session, you get to hear what you're missing out on. It's night and day. I actually prefer the recording compared to the Peel session overall. But that bass was just such a misstep. That really should be louder in the mix. Next comes the penultimate song of the album, I Don't Owe You Anything, which is far more somber and laid back. And after a run of songs that are very upbeat with lots of overdubs, there really isn't that much instrumentation or overdubs. This kind of does work in the album's favour. Again, I have stated that the mixing is very iffy on the album overall, so when there is less instrumentation, there's not as many instruments that can clash with each other. The guitar is loud and clear, and so is the bass and the drums. Johnny again does these stabby little funk-esque strum hits. Actually, it's more of a 50s inspired sound, you know, like doo-wop. It would always have like a bass run or a riff that would end with a quick hit of a chord and being muted quickly after. And as there isn't that much instrumentation going on or overdubs, it just rings out throughout the full space and you can just hear it in your headphones. The drums are very subdued too. It's a very, very simple beat, and there's not much going on with them. It's mostly just Johnny's guitar and this nice little bass line from Andy just kind of supporting the song. It's a really good structure for a song, and it leads us through some somber moods and sections while staying relatively chilled out. It gets a little bit more hyper in the chorus where more overdubs come in, and it does get a little muddy. The track never explodes, it keeps this somber feeling throughout the entire runtime, which suits the lyrics as well, as Morrissey talks about not wanting to go out at night. I struggle to interpret this song a bit, but overall it sounds like there is a lot of venom in Morrissey's lyrics compared to other songs on this album. It sounds like it's about getting back at someone and finally having enough of them just pushing them to go out all the time. Or maybe it's just about a failed romance. It sort of resets the vibe of the album, going from the very upbeat, positive nature of What Difference Does It Make to this slightly somber, chilled out vibe. And it definitely needed to reset to this atmosphere, because the next song is one of the bleakest and darkest songs in the Smiths' entire discography. I don't think people were fully prepared for what the subject matter of the final song was on this album. The theme of innocence runs through this album, and the album closer is about the ultimate loss of innocence. Suffer Little Children ends off the album, and it is a very, very dark song. The music is very, very dour and melancholic, but it doesn't sound completely bleak. There is some nice tones in Johnny's arpeggios and his playing, especially the acoustic guitar that just slowly rings out every so often, overdubbed onto the track. It's a perfect transition from I Don't Owe You Anything, and it still has this relaxed feeling to it. But then Morrissey starts to sing, and the subject matter of the song is very apparent. Suffer Little Children is about the Moors murders, a very infamous set of child murders that took place in England in the 60s. It was a deplorable and horrific story, and this image of the perpetrators, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, are burned into British history because of the reprehensibleness of their actions. They really were monsters. I'm not going to go into details. You can look into the story of the Moors yourself, but be warned, it is extremely upsetting. The Moors murders casted this dark cloud over England. Even when I grew up decades later after these murders, I knew about these individuals. I remember seeing their faces on the news whenever you would see any other terrible crimes about children. It is a horrific story, and as a child, it is hard to comprehend how these actions are possible and how the world is filled with stories such as this. These acts are real. They happened in England, where I live. When you're a child looking at these things on the news and you see this horrific crime and the victims look just like you and they live where you live, it is the ultimate loss of innocence. Realizing the world has many terrible things in it, that wonderment and safety you felt just kind of disappearing when you hear stories like this is just morbid. It's not hard to think about doom and gloom when discussing these subjects. And there are people who have even told me, why do you listen to this stuff? Why do you listen to this depressing, sad music? What does it do for you? I think discussing these very difficult and dark subjects in songs is very important personally. When you're an artist that speaks about life, of course that comes with the darker sides of life too, which the Smiths delve into. For me, these darker songs are self-reflective. They allow me to comprehend these stories instead of just ignoring them and blocking them out. They do appear, these events do happen. It's important to confront these, especially when looking at all of the media and books and other music that delve into these exact same serious subjects. Looking at these subjects kind of acts as a way to meditate on them and make sure you yourself don't get bogged down by these dark and gloomy thoughts. I can see why people do avoid this type of music. I would understand if this would make you uncomfortable and you don't want to listen to it. But I think it's great for art to challenge people and make it difficult to listen to every once in a while, so we don't remain stagnant and just stuck. Morrissey has proven as well in this song he doesn't have to always add some levity like he has in previous songs. He doesn't sensationalize these actions either, he just says these horrific things as blunt as possible. After going through some of the victims by name, Morrissey eventually changes his lyrics to seemingly talk to Hindley and Brady. You might sleep, but you will never dream. I thought this was Morrissey damning these awful and horrible individuals, and how the spirits of the deceased will forever haunt them. But then I was taken aback by the realization that maybe Morrissey is talking about the parents of the victims. And then it just becomes nightmarish to think that these parents can never really move on. And whilst they may eventually be able to sleep, they will never be able to dream again after their lives have been irreparably changed. Sometimes there are no happy endings, which is really hard for a kid to comprehend. And I imagine Morrissey, growing up in the 60s in Manchester, must have been deeply affected by these murders. It is one of those things that you just think about and get lost in. I don't mean to be dramatic, but yeah, it's a very difficult subject to delve into. But it is easy to forget that there is a lot of joy and humour in this album too. The end might leave the lasting impression, but what makes it special is the life behind the end. It's this odd mix as well, because these horrific lyrics are just accompanied by this very beautiful sound. The instrumentation in the song is just so luscious and beautiful. It suits the somber music. It still has the technical playing from Andy and Marr, with the guitar ringing out a lot and having his signature jangly style just subdued with a slower pace. Andy is also playing some really nice soothing bass lines as well. Noticeably, he is playing on the lower end as well, which I think suits the dark subject of the song much better than playing high or with a twangy tone. That would not suit the song whatsoever. And again, it starts with that ringing out drum sound. The sticks this time are just ringing out before the song starts. It's a really, really fantastic album closer, and it's probably the perfect way to end an album about the loss of innocence. At least that's what I get from this album. If I had any criticisms about this song, I'd say maybe the laughter sample was a little misplaced. I did not think it needed to be there. I get what he was going for, but it does make it a little bit more dramatic, which I think isn't the way to take the song. I think they should have kept it just as flat as possible and just state what has happened as it has. It's an amazing album dealing with many different themes that could be sexuality, relationships, loss of innocence, and just a general wanting and needing to be accepted, accompanied by just some amazing songwriting by Johnny, and just a rock-solid drum beat from Mike keeping the band going, and just some of the most catchiest bass lines you can get from Andy in indie rock, which is why it feels so terrible to say that this is the worst Smiths album. Still, it's an album that you really cannot go wrong with, despite some of the issues I have with the production, mixing, and one or two songs like Miserable Lie that I feel just aren't up to par with the rest of the tracks. It is still a brilliant album, with some of the best songs you can get from the 80s being on this album, like This Charming Man. Now, the ranking from here gets even more difficult. Each time I have attempted to complete this script, I have changed who is at the top. And the next 3 albums at one point or another were all at number 1 at some point. So there isn't much in it after this. The production issues makes this an easy 4th place, but 3rd, 2nd and 1st, now it becomes very difficult. But anyways, let's just rip the plaster off and just get through the rest of the albums. Coming in at number 3 is Strange Ways, Here We Come. Another brilliant album that Johnny and Morrissey both agree is their best. And whilst I do agree it is a phenomenal album, I have some issues with some of the songwriting on a few of these songs, plus one or two go on for quite a while, and one in particular has just a really long intro that doesn't serve much purpose. Anyways, this album served as a little hint as to what the Smiths would have gotten up to if they survived the 80s and went into the 90s. It's kind of funny going from the Smiths' debut straight to their fourth album, because everything is just bigger and more bombastic. Even the smaller, somber songs have these big choruses and a lot of production work, shying away from this stripped-down, jangly indie rock sound on their debut. I mean, they aren't a small indie band anymore at this point, and the album definitely reflects this. The sound is best described as big. The drums feel like stadium performance drums sometimes. Morrissey is far more dramatic, more than he's ever been, and Johnny was experimenting with many new sounds and many different new instruments that weren't used in the Smiths originally. Andy, for the most part, kind of stays the same with his music. There isn't really much change to his bass playing. But to be honest, I don't think it really needed a change. You kind of need something of an identity of the Smiths, and his bass lines are always something to hold on to in these songs. Let's start with the intro song, A Rush and a Push and the Land is Ours. We first hear Morrissey's reversed vocals spreading around the entire mix. It feels grandiose already with this swirling reverb effect. And then we get what sounds like a harpsichord playing the main notes with a marching drum beat from Mike. And the reverb, smothered on Morrissey's vocals, slowly eases back as the song starts, settling down to a less ghostly level. It is still there though, and it is still quite ethereal, which makes sense as his first lyrics is from the point of view of a ghost called Troubled Joe. After the reverb on Morrissey's vocals settles down, the song properly starts with the introduction of a marimba, I believe, playing these little descending notes every bar. And it changes quite quickly to the pre-chorus and the chorus straight away from this verse. However, through this intro, pre-chorus and chorus, there is no sign of the distinctive playing from Johnny's twangy guitar. In fact, from what I can hear, there is no guitar in this track whatsoever, showing that they are touching onto different sounds just by using different instrumentation, like the mentioned harpsichord or maybe electric piano. Despite the absence of this twangy, jangly guitar, this song is very clearly still the Smiths. I never even realised that there was no guitar in it until trying to analyse it for this video. And the jangly harpsichord playing sort of is a surrogate for this jangly guitar. It keeps that same Smith sound whilst exploring different instruments. It helps that the bass is relatively unchanged, so you can still hook on to Andy's catchy bass. It's not a dramatic shift, it's not a Kid A moment, but it's some interesting instrumentation and experimentation from Johnny. The drums on this song just sound bigger, with reverb on the whole set instead of just the snare like we saw on the debut of the Smiths, Reel Around the Fountain. Especially on the pre-chorus, where it really does fill the mix with a restrained but hard-hitting performance by Mike. Morrissey, though, is far more dramatic on this song and expressive with his performance compared to previous songs, with small vocal changes and inflections that help change his performance to sound slightly erratic. For example, he just growls on the song before the actual chorus. And he has this yelping, chirping vocal performance on the higher sections, especially on the lyrics "Fool Me." It adds just a lot of character and it makes the performance very dramatic. It almost reminds me of something that you'd find in like a panto. It's that pompous sarcasm that people love and hate about Morrissey, just turned up to 11 on this song. His lyrics are also much the same too. I believe he is talking about the monarchy here, or perhaps just a general sense of being tired of rulers or sick of the government. It can be applied to many things. Again, it sounds like a very simple song. I mean, there have been many songs being anti-establishment, especially in the 80s. But Morrissey's lyrics, again, just help add this extra colour. Like the lyric, "And people who are uglier than you and I They take what they need and just leave. I love this lyric because instead of saying that they are just pure evil and we are superior, him saying uglier insinuates that, well, yes, we are still ugly, but they're uglier than us. As if we can't really get rid of this ugly nature or evil side to humanity. Or perhaps the character in the song is just delusional and just as power-hungry as those in charge. And just by adding these extra twists with his word choices, the songs can just take a left turn and it can give you a second thought as to what the song actually means. Production is far more cohesive here as well, especially when compared to the debut. They got the production right starting from the second album, and the production work and mixing is superb on the second, third and fourth albums by the Smiths. Morrissey is perfectly clear in most of the songs he's in. Sometimes the reverb, like in the beginning, can make it difficult to work out what he is saying, but it's used for effect in those circumstances. It's very easy to decipher what he's actually saying in the majority of the songs. The bass is audible, which is always good, and it is usually placed at a good level in the mix. It's not too overbearing, just like the drums, which pop out of the mix when needed. You can hear that crisp snare always coming through and the rattling hi-hats. Nothing's fighting over frequencies, it's just very clear and audible. It's not as sharp either. I did criticise the first album for being quite thin and tinny, but most of the instruments here have this full tone to it. Just listen to that bass in the intro, you can hear all of it. And it's great that you can hear everything so well because it is a very, very big sound, especially some of the songs coming up. They are just drenched in reverb and it can get quite tricky to pan and mix all of these instruments when you're just dealing with so many different frequencies. And so when there are loads of overdubs and the song does get a bit hectic, it's just so enjoyable to just pick out these little sounds that you can hear in the mix. But one thing I do want to highlight is that they did start off this entire album without Johnny on the guitar. It's very brave and shows that Johnny is leaning into this further experimentation. Just trying something new, 3 albums in. I can see why Johnny might have gotten bored with this sound. The next song on the track list is I've Started Something I Couldn't Finish, which is far more stereotypical of a Smiths song. It's almost like it was placed here to reassure buyers that Johnny actually is on this album and they do have guitar. No, wait, Johnny is here. Here, listen, his guitar's here. It starts off with this guitar, and even though it is a bit more stereotypical for the Smiths, it's got more of an edge to it, and it sounds distorted, which is pretty new for the Smiths at this point. It's completely opposite to their jangly sound on songs like This Charming Man. There's a nice snappy snare there in the background too, which adds this jagged sound to it. Although it isn't a decadent, muddy, messy song like something from Pixies, I mean not with those horns in the background, definitely not, it still allows Johnny to go into a harder and more abrasive sound without destroying the vibe of the Smiths. One thing I'm not very sure about on this song is Morrissey's vocal inflections. Some vocal ad-libs by Morrissey don't sound too good on this song. He has these throaty parts which I just don't like, they are not very nice to listen to. It kind of reminds me of the same throaty noises he used on the live album Rank, which I would describe as, well, rank. Other than that though, I think his vocal performance is really nice here, and it's a lot more ragged and unrefined, which kind of suits the subject of the song, as the protagonist for the song is very angry and sarcastic. I see it as someone trying to push someone towards something, and then when they react negatively to this, they try and take the moral high ground. Like typical me, I've started something, kind of sarcastically suggesting that they're not in the wrong for pushing this person into something. I started something. I forced you to a zone, and you were clearly never meant to go. It just kind of illustrates that, oh well, you were completely unprepared for this, it's not my fault. He just knows that he's in the wrong, but he's just being an utter bastard about it. Funny thing is about this is that the person seems to acknowledge their error and state that 18 months hard labour seems fair enough, which was the same amount of time Trouble Joe was hanged from his pretty white neck in the ghostly intro. Could be a connection there in song subject maybe, or maybe just a fun callback, not exactly sure to be honest. Structure-wise, it's really simple, as are quite a few of the songs on this album. Johnny kind of wanted to revolt against the previous mentality of the Smiths that sort of neglected rock and didn't want to have solos. There's a lot more power chords and simple chords and solos in this album. However, the instrumentation accompanying these songs is usually what makes them unique. There is a bit of flair to it. There are some sampled horn sections in there which sound extremely fake. And every so often, Marr's guitar just reappears again sporadically, with this little bend supported by some tight drumming by Mike. Sounds great. It's almost Hendrixy, it sounds like Voodoo Child, those quick bends. You'll also notice on this song and quite a few others that there are these little strange production choices throughout the entire track. Just a random chorus effect just chucked in for emphasis, or maybe even a reversing, delayed guitar sample just playing, getting louder and louder and louder before the solo. These reverse sounds and little strange additions to the mix make it really fun to just listen out for them, and they're usually used for great effect. I appreciate Johnny a hell of a lot more as a guitarist and a songwriter listening to this album. Just listening to where he places things and just adding this little extra bit of seasoning to the song. And it's just fun just finding all of these little almost Easter eggs in this mix. These extra effects really do add on to the song and just make things more interesting. Next is Death of a Disco Dancer. The overall vibe of this song is kind of eerie and laid back, which is the third different atmosphere for this album so far. Johnny is playing these eerie notes which I think are at the top of his guitar, where the machine heads are. Or perhaps he's taken a pick and slowly grinding it on one of the strings down the neck. I'm not too sure, but either way it makes this eerie, downtrodden noise. It sounds like Morse code. It all blends to make a creepy and eerie vibe, along with the bass just slowly descending down from the fretboard, and again a flat snare which always illustrates a moody atmosphere. It all just creates this creepy, unnerving atmosphere. It slowly builds upon this sound throughout the entire song, eventually ending in this just massive, odd sound which we'll get to. The song is pretty much build up and then officially gets going after the drums come in with quite a heavy sound. They make a bigger splash because of the restraint of the other instruments in the intro, especially the guitar, which is still just playing around on the machine heads. There's some other interesting sounds just tucked away into the mix here too. Like there is a sampled string section in the background, just subtly after the drums come in. And then Morrissey's voice just gets this strange type of reverb on it, which adds to the resonance of his voice and adds to the overall off-putting nature of the song. After the first verse, again, he has this radio-like vocals on his groans that are just panned from side to side, wailing like a disinterested ghost. They pack in a lot of subtle changes and sounds in this album, and this again is a perfect example of it. Probably the go-to example actually on the album. The song gets going a little bit more, and now it's slightly faster, with the toms panned left and right, and the drums sound like they have a phaser or something on them, like one of the songs from XTC. They're really just bouncing around this mix, just creating a darker sound from the small one that it started with. The guitar is then doubled up just before, all of a sudden, this massive electric synth panning left to right just smashes its way into the track, going up and down just on two notes, just ending this entire song with a cacophony of sound, as Johnny gets extremely aggressive with his playing. So it's a song that starts with this creepy atmosphere and just goes into this all-out aggression at the end and chaos. Especially that really sharp, loud synth. It's very overbearing. Now for song subject. The song Death of a Disco Dancer is simply about the death of a disco dancer, although the lyrics in the song make it sound like a murder specifically. Disco, of course, in the 80s had a bad reputation. That's where the phrase deader than disco came from, almost like this disco dancer was murdered because they like disco. To kill over disco is extremely ridiculous and trivial, and in the song it sounds like the disco dancer is a placeholder for the murders of individuals over pointless and irrational reasons. And Morrissey in his lyrics is just so unaffected by this death. It makes the song a lot more darker in subject matter. When the person isn't exactly surprised about the death of a disco dancer, it's become a common occurrence. His almost disinterested vocals kind of make it sound like, yeah, people get killed here for just what they are, it happens. This is particularly illustrated by the section where Morrissey is singing over and over, love, peace and harmony, very nice, very nice, very nice, but maybe in the next world, and kind of shows the futility of getting on together. Overall, it's a very experimental sound for the Smiths, and probably quite a divisive song, I imagine, especially the ending, which is probably kind of grating for some, but it really does suit the performance that Morrissey is giving, and the subject of the song kind of reflecting this seedy town that has murdered this disco dancer. It flows really, really well into the next song too, Girlfriend in a Coma. It's a very strange listen, this song, because just from the instrumentation and the title alone, it sounds like a parody of The Smiths by The Smiths. First, the instrumentation and the production is just very bright and sweet, starting with a two-note bass line, and the bass sound is just reminiscent of the Smiths' debut and some of the Peel sessions. It's got this double-up twang effect to it. Although it does sound quite unnatural, it sounds like it's being supported by a synth or electric bass or something. There's a bit of chorus on there too, I believe, and Mike's drums are solid but very simple. And Ma is playing this funky, muted section on the guitar, whilst a harmonica is playing in the background. The song is about a girlfriend in a coma. It sounds like a very, very sad subject matter. It sounds very candid, with Morrissey realising how serious the situation is and begging to see his girlfriend, or begging not to see her because he doesn't want to see the sight of her in a coma. Switching between these two thoughts of not wanting to see her and wanting to see her in her final moments despite the state she might be in. Sounds very, very heartbreaking. Horrible situation. But it's so candid. There's just this doubt in my mind that this is not a serious song. Morrissey is taking the piss here. And the acoustic guitar being played, it sounds too much. It sounds like they're going for this overly sweet sound. It does sound like a parody of a song like Cemetery Gates, maybe. Also in the background there's a few noises in there as well, like a reverse guitar to enhance the whimsy sound. It just sounds way too whimsy and goofy. And it's this conflicting feeling of, is he serious? Is he talking about this in a serious way, or is he doing it as a joke? I mean, just listen to that sickeningly sweet acoustic guitar.
It's serious.
It's so sugary and whimsy with this dark subject matter. It just must be a joke. It's like the sound of Shiny Happy People by R.E.M., but with far more just tongue-in-cheek. An interpretation I'm fond of is that maybe the boyfriend in this situation actually caused the coma and was actually attempting to kill his girlfriend. Constantly asking, do you think she'll pull through? Can you please let me see her? You know, as if he wants to finish the job before she can regain consciousness and dob on him. When you think about that being the subject, it becomes just a complete farce, and it's just so funny. There were times where I could have strangled her, there are times I could have murdered her. It's such horrible language to use if this was a serious situation. So far we haven't crossed a similar sounding song yet in the track list. It's all been completely different song by song. And that continues too with the next song, which is by far the biggest song production-wise. And it is actually my favourite song on the album. Stop me if you think you've heard this one before. It's both poking fun at people who claim the Smiths make the exact same sounding song and just repeat it over and over again, and it is also seemingly about a relationship where someone constantly cheats. Morrissey is on top form lyrically here, both delivering both of these messages simultaneously. It starts straight away with this big, long, massive guitar strum by Johnny, along with mountains of reverb just making this wall of sound effect. all while the drums and bass and Morrissey explodes onto the song, and it's just all so clear despite this hectic guitar work from Johnny. In what's unique for Morrissey, the vocals are double-tracked in some sections. Basically, double-tracked is when you're recorded singing twice, and then they layer that on top of each other, and it gives a chorus-like effect. The Beatles did it a lot, and it's done a lot in modern pop songs. But in indie rock in the 80s, it's something that usually doesn't happen. Indie rock is supposed to be stripped back of these production tricks, to be more, brackets, authentic. Anyways, it's rare for Morrissey to do this, and it creates this warm chorus effect on his vocals.
All who said I lied because I never.
And it's kind of funny that in one of the only times where his vocals are double-tracked, it's when he is singing "Stop Me If You Think You've Heard This One Before." Must have been intentional. But Morrissey's vocals and just the instrumentation from the band just create this dream pop-esque atmosphere and soundscape. I could see Elizabeth Fraser singing over this song, especially with the grandiose pre-chorus with these big slow strums that are just so 80s. And then the lead-in from Johnny just before it goes back in with these sliding notes, it's just this massive build-up. It's so great at hyping up the chorus, and even though the chorus is repeated quite a lot, it always comes in full force with just this massive sound. The choruses on this album are much bigger and defined. This is the biggest example of that cleaner production. It sounds commercial more than anything that they have done before. But that same unique guitar structure from Johnny is still there, as well as Morrissey's ironic and sarcastic vocal delivery, with his deep baritone voice. We also get a very, very rare solo from Johnny, which sort of cements this song as the poppiest song that they have done. It's definitely one of my favourites and just sounds great. But as well as sounding great, Morrissey's lyrics here are just so vivid. Just the words that he comes up with to show you that he's scorned is just so overly dramatic, and the pain was enough to make a shy, bold Buddhist reflect and plan a mass murder. Who would come up with such a wordy way of saying, "Oh, I'm in so much pain," that a Buddhist would reflect on murdering people if they were in my position? Just the arrogance and self-pity in his vocals is so funny. It's just a great set of lyrics that have so much in them, you can just spend hours dissecting them and looking for other interpretations. So they've been on a great run on this album so far, and it's easy to see why it is seen as the best album by Johnny and Morrissey. However, the next song kind of taints the album a little bit for me. It's the song "Last Night I Dreamt Somebody Loved Me," which seems like it is poking fun at Morrissey's propensity to kind of make things out as worse than they actually are. Even the title alone just sounds like a parody. Before the song starts, you get this overindulgent 2-minute long piano piece with sound effects of a mob and even a whale. This could have probably benefited from being around a minute or even 30 seconds long. It really did not need nearly 2 minutes. It really does drag, which affects the pacing. And then, after it sounds like it builds up a lot, it just stops for a few seconds before haphazardly finally starting the song. It doesn't feel like a build-up, it feels like a build-up, stop, and then it starts. It's too overindulgent and overdramatic for me to consider heartbreaking. It's not a "Well I Wonder" or a "Asleep." It doesn't feel as close or as thought-provoking. It is a treat to listen to though. There's some really nice production work going on, and it's nice to have this orchestral sound which just adds this warmth to it, and it builds up this over-dramatic sound. I really do love those massive drums too. It really does just seem extremely excessive. To be honest, actually, now thinking about it, I do like the overindulgence. I just don't think it meshes well with the 2-minute plodding, somber piano piece at the beginning. Which is why I really like the single, actually. It removes the intro and it sounds a lot better for it. Next is the song "Unhappy Birthday." "Unhappy Birthday" is passive aggressiveness in song form. Morrissey comes to wish an unhappy birthday to an evil person and wishing misery upon them. However, Morrissey makes it clear he isn't a monster, and so if they should die, he may feel slightly sad, but still he won't cry. It's this childish and facetious song, and it's the closest Morrissey gets to I Wish You Were Dead without actually saying it. The whole song feels like an angry 12-year-old writing in their diary about being dumped. But then there's this odd subtext to it from these lyrics. Loved and lost, and some may say, when usually it's nothing, surely you're happy it should be this way. I say no, I'm gonna kill my dog. From these lyrics, it sounds like this person is just emotionless, a shell, and the anger they feel from this person who betrayed them is better than nothing that they've previously had. I say no, I'm gonna kill my dog is another pathetic, moody outburst by the protagonist, to just get some attention. It's definitely a humorous song at its heart, but it has this really dark side to it if you read into it. And it sounds like this person is just really, really jealous that this person scorned them, and so is trying to do tit for tat and make them feel as bad as possible. But it's that hesitance to say, I wish you were dead. It's that little hesitance that makes it seem like this person isn't being true with what they are saying, and they actually want to be back together with this person. And this is the only way they can really get that across. The instrumentation around him is quite upbeat too, with some nice jangly acoustic guitar from Johnny, an up-tempo bass, and a nice drum rhythm from Mike. With most of the songs on this album, there's always this extra flavour that Johnny adds to the instrumentation. Here it's what sounds like maybe a lap steel, maybe some slide guitar actually, just slowly going from right to left and left to right across the mix every so often. Just picking up this little high-pitched noise, it just adds a different element to the track. And it does make it far more somber, as if maybe the person wishing this unhappy birthday isn't really being true to how they actually feel. And maybe they still have some feelings for the person that has scorned them. It's completely covered in reverb as well, and most of the other instrumentation hasn't got too much reverb on it, so you really can hear it soar across the entire mix. Just a nice little detail that makes this short song just that little bit more interesting. I like the outro quite a lot too, where this lap steel or slide guitar, I think it is slide guitar after hearing it a little bit more, is just full front and center into the mix right now, as Morrissey just croons over it, singing about him being left behind, which makes me think that in the end, this person still has feelings for the person he is trying to be passive-aggressive towards. It's a solid song. It's not as good songwriting-wise as the earlier tracks in the album, but it gets us back to a good vibe and atmosphere after Last Night I Dreamt Somebody Loved Me kind of took the album off the rails a little bit. Next is Paint a Vulgar Picture. I haven't really spoken too much about the themes on this album, but it seems like a just overall dissatisfaction with the music industry. Being very colourful with his language, it's clear to see Morrissey is just very sick of these sorts of people that manipulate others in the business, and lamenting the special editions of songs and releases. It really is a song that just paints a vulgar picture of this business. The music for the most part doesn't stand out too much, based around a simple chord progression and a jangly sound, which, I've said that plenty of times in this video, it's kind of what Johnny does best. Covered in reverb as well, it echoes out in the stereo mix, it sounds really good, the production's still very stellar. But again, like the other songs on this album, there are some other instruments which just make things a little bit more interesting, like the partially panned trumpets to the left poking into the mix every so often, and Johnny's sliding guitar just panned to the right, which swells as Andy's climbing bass guitar just goes through the entire mix, and Mike has this big 80s drum sound, which has been pretty much the same thing for all of the tracks on this album. It kind of glues them together, to be honest. All these tracks kind of feel like a cohesive piece. Sound-wise, it's probably pretty similar to I Started Something. Feels a little moodier though. They must have done this on purpose as well, but Johnny, as I stated, doesn't really do solos too often. They're quite a rare occurrence. So I think it's pretty funny on the song that laments the music industry and the race to the top of the charts and the top of the pops, that this is one of the few songs that has a solo in it. almost like a tongue-in-cheek way of saying, okay, you want a pop song? Here's a pop song. It's about how shit the industry is. It's a very simple solo that's just covered in reverb and has lots and lots of slow bends in it. Johnny Marr is probably the only guitarist that I can think of where their solos are the easiest part of their playing. He doesn't really show off, and it reminds me of David Gilmour a little bit. He just has slow bends that kind of fills in the mix rather than shredding or playing fast hammer-ons here and there. It could be a love song as well, with someone having a love towards a performer maybe they didn't know. Or maybe Morrissey, now in the industry, is now friends with a legend in the industry that has just washed up. The lyrics could tell a myriad of stories. I don't think it is just about the music industry. In fact, I don't think Morrissey goes for single subjects most of the time. Usually kind of scattershots, and this is a perfect example of it. It's to do with the music industry, but there's a lot more to the music industry than just horrible people wanting to get as much money as possible. Or it could be Morrissey as a fan of an artist who has passed away, talking to the recently deceased as if they were a personal friend. They cannot taint you in my eyes. They cannot touch you now. As if the friend had a sickness that can't harm them anymore. Death has rid them of the rot of the industry. On their hands at last a dead star. Kind of pointing at the very morbid fact that when legends die, the record sales jump up. And then Morrissey kind of pathetically cries out, which sounds really inauthentic actually. And then it goes into cheery hand clapping and a really bright guitar phrase from Johnny. I think this kind of exaggerates the evil record executives or perhaps the fans that are celebrating the death of someone in the same way that celebrity deaths are sort of glamorized and romanticized even today. It's a lot to unpack actually, and I imagine my analysis of the lyrics is probably very scatterbrained as well. It's a bit all over the place. But overall, I think it is about the viciousness of the music machine in the 80s, as well as the zealous fans who celebrate the deaths of people who have passed on. After this great track is another song that I am not too crazy about. It is the song Death at One's Elbow. It feels very out of place here. It feels like a B-side rockabilly experiment that didn't have enough polish on it to warrant it being put on the album, especially at the penultimate song slot. Quite an important album song placement. It's just before the final song. It sort of sets the groundwork before the final song puts a full stop on the entire album. Coming straight after Paint a Vulgar Picture, which had a slight somber tone, this one is just a rockabilly song, which has this western twang and slapback echo bass sound. It doesn't blend well, it doesn't go well from Paint a Vulgar Picture to this song. You'll see the flow of the album is even worse by the ending song, which does not match in tone to Death at One's Elbow. For positives, I do like the country-esque twang and slapback echo on Andy's bass. It's pretty fun for this track. And the harmonica that accompanies the guitar in this song at the very end of each phrase, it's a nice little interesting sound, and it serves as a nice contrast to the twangy bass guitar that Andy is playing. But I don't know, it just kind of feels like a little experiment, nothing much more. There's nothing else going on here instrumentation-wise that really elevates it above this simple riff and phrase. And whilst not every song has to have these overly dramatic and poetic lyrics that are always sarcastic, witty sounding with hitting meanings and double entendres and, you know, the usual wordy works and words, it really does feel like Morrissey has slacked off here a bit. With Oh Glenn being the most sung lyric, I have no idea who Glenn is. It's probably a book or movie reference knowing Morrissey, or maybe someone that he knows in the record industry. And the mix of Glenn being maybe the target of love or murder could be interesting, but it just doesn't go far enough into the lyrics, and the song pretty much ends before anything more interesting happens. It does get pretty interesting near the end though. The weird reversed vocals on Morrissey's backing vocals is really strange and otherworldly. And the little climbing melody at the very end does at least put a nice ending to the song, but overall it's just fine. It's a little underwhelming from what we've heard previously on this album. That's enough about Death at One's Elbow though, let's talk about the final song, I Won't Share You. Starting with Morrissey singing and Johnny's acoustic guitar, with the bass tucked into the mix, following the acoustic's chords. It is definitely the most intimate sounding song on the entire album, especially when you realise he is giving up this person because he can't share them with their dreams and aspirations. It's also quite poignant that this is the final song on a Smiths album. Life tends to come and go, and Morrissey is leaving us, as is the rest of the Smiths. But we'll see him somewhere, we'll see him sometime, goodbye. And in fact, we will see him again a year later on Viva Hate. I don't know if maybe he knew he would leave for a solo career, but it really does sound like Morrissey is closing the book on the Smiths and moving on to something else. It is not my favourite album closer. To me, that award goes to Suffer Little Children, but after starting out of the gates with this really big studio sound and then just having this quiet acoustic ballad ending the entire album, I don't know, I really like albums that do that, like in Rainbows, just starting with this massive sound and then ending in a location completely different to where you started. It's just one guitar in the middle, and so this means the reverb on Morrissey's voice and his words just spread across the entire mix left to right. To be honest, I think they maybe go a bit too strong on the reverb. I like the idea that the reverb gets more and more hectic as the song goes on, as he's crying out. But in the intro, I think they could have just put the dial back a little bit and start off a little bit more intimate. I like the use of what I think is a harmonica on this song as well. It really just puts that icing on the track as being extra bittersweet, with this sharp, soaring, sad noise just ringing out in the background. It is not as complex or as instrumentally diverse as other songs on this album, but I think it serves as a great ending to this album. And that's how the album ends, just slowly fading out with this harmonica and guitar work from Johnny. Again, another fantastic album, but I have placed it third, and that is because one or two songs like Death at One's Elbow just don't really do much for me. And the intro of Last Night I Dreamt Somebody Loved Me is just too much. It really needed to be reined back a little bit. Plus the flow of the album is a bit all over the place to me. The reason why it wasn't last is because the production work is just so good on this album. It sounds amazing to just have headphones on and just listen to all this different instrumentation just swirling around the entire mix for pretty much all songs. Pretty much every song has this weird, unique instrumentation added onto it, whether that be the intro with the harpsichord-esque piano, or even the ending song with this ghostly harmonica. Anyways, great album, and we are now halfway through, which leaves 2 albums left. So let's just rip the plaster off and get to number 2 so everyone already knows what number 1 is. Meat is Murder. Originally, I placed Meat is Murder at number 1, and I thought this was quite a unique choice. I was almost proud of myself for going against the grain and saying The Queen is Dead was actually second. Meat is Murder just has the best quality of songs on it overall. Just song by song, track by track, it is absolutely phenomenal. The sounds they go through, the production, the song structures they make, the lyrical content from Morrissey, the insanely catchy riffs and bass lines from Andy, it was just perfection. Although I can say the exact same thing for The Queen is Dead, but the songs overall on Meat is Murder I just liked more. However, as an album, Meat is Murder does have a fatal flaw in it, and it is because of that reason as an album that I have actually ranked Meat is Murder as number 2. I'll get into that fatal flaw as I go track by track, but that fatal flaw will be the last thing I talk about on this album. And so, for those of you who already know this album front to back, you probably know what controversial song in the track list ultimately makes me put this song at number 2 instead of number 1. Anyways, getting ahead of myself, let's start with the intro song and just go song by song, starting with The Headmaster's Ritual. The best intro song for any Smiths album, in my opinion. It starts straight away with the band just in full force. There's no build-up whatsoever. It's the sound of a smashing snare, Johnny's just loud and vibrant guitar, and a plucky bass line from Andy. The drums are driving and clear, bouncing into the mix. The guitar is filling the entire stereo space of the song, covering it in numerous effects. There's flanger, I believe, chorus effects, and just lots of reverb too, along with the acoustic guitar panned left and right to add more jangle and a brighter tone to this guitar. And the bass is just far more prominent in this album compared to the previous album, The Smiths. It is very audible, everything is so clear despite this hectic noise from all of the instruments. It is an explosive intro. It's a fantastic sound from a production standpoint. Everything is so clear and light, but it's not too harsh. There isn't too much sibilance. There isn't too much high end. That jangle is still there, but it's more in the mids. It's not harsh or tinny sounding. It's also not filled with much muddy low ends as well. There is a real full tone to this song and to this album. It just sounds really nice on your ears, just simply put. Specifically on The Headmaster's Ritual, the song structure is just one of my favourites from the band too. It's just so unpredictable on a first listen. From chord to chord and note to note, I have praised Johnny a lot for his structures. His structures are just so unique, but it instantly makes his songs stand out amongst his contemporaries. I count around 8 chords in the verse alone, which is a lot of variation for a pop song, and that's not even taking into account the little licks and overdubs he adds on top of this structure. This structure and chord progression he comes up with is just so good for build-up too. So when Morrissey finally jumps onto the track, it just comes at you full force. Johnny and Morrissey, probably hate to say it now, but they were both made for each other songwriting-wise. And The Headmaster's Ritual is a perfect example of their collaborative efforts. After the intro with this massive sound by Johnny and the band, it sort of calms down for a second, and these loud, expansive guitars are just no longer present, so all you hear is Johnny's main lick, just covered with a chorus effect. One thing I really like about this guitar lick as well is that it is hardly used. Quite a lot of rock songs just have a really catchy riff and just hold on to it. Johnny Marr hardly plays this lick in this song, and so when it does actually make itself apparent, it's just a hell of a lot more effective. It's just so well implemented. Johnny knows exactly when to introduce it and when to bring it back. The band uses space a lot more effectively on this song too compared to their debut. Again, pulling back some instruments so others can breathe. Like in the intro where the main lick comes in just bright and effective, and the acoustic guitars and plucky bass are removed. So all you can hear is this drum sound and the main lick, as the bass and the bright guitar sound are just taken away from the mix. And then they can come back in to make a splash. Morrissey comes in after the band set the groundwork and the tone of the song. Now onto the song subject, Morrissey is singing about his experience at school with a particularly nasty headmaster. I wouldn't be surprised if he was based on an actual head teacher Morrissey encountered. Teachers in Britain during the 60s, 70s and 80s used to be just really nasty. They were allowed to smack kids and get the cane out, so stories about a nasty headmaster just smacking kids and being authoritative like a dictator is not too uncommon, and so I'm not surprised at his lyrics. But again, Morrissey always has to add this extra little flair to his lyrics. They make a very straightforward subject of dealing with child abuse and just making it more colourful and vivid. He creates a clear image of the exact type of person this headmaster is, a cartoonish portrayal that most of us wouldn't think would be true to life. Sir brings the troops, jealous of youth, same suit from 1962, old jokes that never changed. From this song's portrayal of the headmaster, I can imagine them being this 50-year-old, bold, chubby bloke in an old suit laughing at his old jokes while smacking kids. He creates a vivid picture. I can see this character. Belligerent goons from Manchester schools, spineless swines, cemented minds. It's very poetic and very wordy, as Morrissey is, and the music accompanying it is very bright and kind of suits this sarcastic tone. But then it goes into a minor phrase as Morrissey gets very blunt with his words. I want to go home, I don't want to stay. Give up education is a bad mistake. It gives this image of a child being trapped in this school system. He can't give up education because everything around Britain revolves around getting your GCSEs, or O-levels, whatever they were back then. And so he has to put up with the headmaster's ritual. He says so much in so little words as well. Just that one line, spineless swines, cemented minds. He could be lambasting the students around him that are maybe joining in on the bullying from the headmaster, or perhaps even the teachers surrounding the headmaster that just aren't doing anything. The fact that he brings up Manchester as well kind of makes me feel like, yes, this is autobiographical from Morrissey. Morrissey is just very adventurous with his voice here too, shying away from the falsetto, which was far too abrasive on some songs in the debut. He kind of finds different ways to kind of show his emotions off. His yodel-esque cries just suit the song perfectly, and it sounds like a cry for help from a child that's just ringing out in the old school in Manchester. What a track. A superb song to kick off the album. And it also plants the theme for this album too. It sounds like the majority of songs are about growing up working class in England. And an odd nostalgia for these days that aren't too bright upon further reflection. And to further this theme, the next song is Rush Home Ruffians. Things clear up a bit production-wise. It's not this massive wall of sound like on the Headmaster's Ritual. And again, it starts with the acoustic guitar panned left and right as Johnny plays muted strings on them. And then this country and rockabilly-esque bass from Andy just appears right on this track after hearing this acoustic guitar, and it just creates this whimsy feeling. And it does sound like a fairground, especially with all the rides you can hear in the background. The acoustic guitar starts playing some chords properly now, and that same jangly sound is still there, but instead of arpeggiated notes, it's just some nice strumming from Johnny, who I think might be playing some open chords, which leads to this really clean, open, big sound that just kind of flows in the mix. I love the little breakdown at the end as well, where Mike kind of emphasizes the breakdown of each chord change by hitting the crash in the ride. It just sounds like a nice little descent back into repeating the same catchy verses that the band are playing. And then, just when you might think this could be a fun little track with a laid-back groove, Morrissey starts singing about a boy being stabbed and his money is grabbed. It is about a trip to the fair and all of the surrounding stories and characters that come from it. From a stabbing, to a broken heart, to someone jumping off of a ride, and someone being beaten up and mugged. Just absolute chaos, and then the music is just this upbeat, happy barnyard burner. It just creates this image of this cheery, childlike, happy fair just covering up all of these terrible things that are going on in a tongue-in-cheek manner. I really do love the sound of the bass here, that twang, that heavy high-end twang cuts straight through the mix. And with Johnny just playing the acoustic guitar instead of his jangly playing, the bass is the main instrument. It is the lead instrument in this song. I also want to highlight Morrissey's vocal cadence here as well. The way he sings, especially in the intro verse, it sounds like a child singing a nursery rhyme or an old school bullying melody, like a na 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 na. It just sounds childlike. Kind of illustrating how vicious kids can be. They can be some vicious little bastards. It continues this theme at the end as well, with this very, very sarcastic kind of like whine, which is definitely reminiscent of a na 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 na. The lyrics further highlight naivete of youth as well, especially the end with the lyrics, "Scratch my name on your arm with a fountain pen. This means I really love you." I'm sure we've all seen people writing on each other in relationships at school and how people are going to be together forever no matter what. And then they get dumped the same day because, I don't know, maybe his mate has a blue eyes white dragon and he only had a dark magician. It just kind of points out how stupid kids are in a way. There's all this chaos and mayhem happening around them, and they're making these big promises for the rest of their lives, not really knowing what it's going to be like when they grow up. It's sort of laughing at this naivete and using this absolute horrible fair experience as an example. So 2 very upbeat songs so far, despite dealing with child abuse and stabbings. And the great songs just keep coming. Leading into track 3, I Want the One I Can't Have. Starting with a reverse drum sound which causes this pitter-patter type of sound, before this upfront and pan guitar just comes in with such a warm and clean tone. It sounds a hell of a lot louder than any other of the instrumentation, but it only shows up for a split second and then disappears. It's kind of like a small teaser of the guitar that will eventually get let loose on the track by Johnny later on. He just feels massive here and his guitar just sticks out and it just feels so nice in the ear. I'm kind of glad it only comes in every so often, because if it was this loud for the entire track, I think it would be a little overbearing. The regular guitar work from Johnny is the standard acoustic guitar work that we've known from his previous tracks. I think there might be an electric guitar hidden overdubbed on top of these acoustic guitars too. Instead of the acoustic guitars supporting the electric guitar, it might work as the electric guitar supporting the acoustic here, as it's a hell of a lot more brighter than what you usually hear. But just hearing this really small riff from Johnny coming every so often along with this acoustic sound, they just work really, really well together. Just the guitar work on this song and just the tones used by Johnny blend together so well. The lyrics of this song seem to be talking about longing for someone you can't have or form a relationship with, despite it being obvious in a very immature way. But the refrain, "It is written all over my face," shows a self-awareness to this nature. I want the one I can't have and it's driving me mad. It's again quite naive and childlike as the other songs were too, which again helps form this narrative of just immatureness and just growing up. It does seem to deal with naivety and immatureness, especially the repeated lyric, "On the day your mentality catches up with your biology," which is probably the most wordiest way you can say at your age. The meaning also seems a little bit scattershot as well, seemingly dealing with the class divide as well, which Morrissey has talked about numerous times on numerous songs. A double bed and a stalwart lover for sure, these are the riches of the poor. The riches of the poor in this song is simple, it's just a loyal and hard-working lover and a double bed. These little narrative strings about class divide, riches and the poor and the monarchy, it serves as little strings whilst the main narrative of the song continues. Yes, the song mentions class divide and a longing, but at the centre of the song it does seem to be about a relationship that this person wants to start with someone, but for one reason or another he can't have this person, probably due to a class divide actually. I want the one I can't have. Kind of like a poor person can't go after a rich person, or vice versa. They all have different subject matters at their heart, but some lines are interchangeable with other songs, which colour in this life in Manchester growing up in the working class for Morrissey. It just makes it sound more cohesive as an album. Usually they do get seen as a singles band, but it's this type of theming in their albums, and the fact that their narratives do link together with similar themes, that makes me think this is probably an incorrect assumption. There aren't any songs that just come out of nowhere and just kind of muddy this theme of working class England in the 80s whilst you're young growing up, except from the obvious one, which we will get to. Anyways, great song. And after this is What She Said, which comes in with a driving fast pace too. So far it's actually a very fast-paced album that is very upbeat actually. Those driving fast drums by Johnny just shows how much energy he has and how he can be very aggressive when he needs to. He doesn't have to be this overly accurate machine playing away these luscious, arpeggiated pieces in perfect unison with the bass. No, he can just thrash out when he wants to, and it always is a treat to hear his overdriven guitar. They've done this a few times on other songs like London, but here it just sounds a lot more melodic, especially the pre-chorus with this interplay between the bass and then Johnny's sharp two bends. The bass is thundering away through the entire track as well, with little stops in Andy's playing, just playing this wandering bass line that continues to stay upbeat, whilst the guitar disappears every so often. Again, the mixing is just so good on this album. Even with this overdriven sound by Johnny and this thundering bass, the drums and vocals and all the other instrumentation is just so clear. No instruments ever get lost in their sound, and compared to Strange Ways Here We Come, they've used the perfect amount of reverb on their songs, and it doesn't get too muddy. I like the reverb in Strange Ways, but sometimes I feel like some of their instruments were covered with a little bit too much. The only instrument with lots and lots of reverb on it that is very noticeable on this song is Morrissey's vocals. So it works really well with the instrumentation, which hasn't got too much reverb on it. Again, as with numerous songs on this album, hey, it seems really upbeat at first. You know, it's got a nice melody to it. Johnny's being very aggressive on the guitar. I wonder what the song's about. Oh, okay, it's seemingly about a suicidal woman kind of just unpacking to Morrissey, and he doesn't really know how to react. Maybe highlighting some character he sees in his youth about someone who's just had loads and loads of rejections and has just had enough of it and is just unpacking to Morrissey, who is just left dumbfounded and having no idea what to do. Again, he's not experienced these things. It goes with the theme of youth yet again. It's quite simple as a song and it's pretty quick. And next is the fifth song on the album, which means we are already halfway through. Track 5, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. It is the first slower paced song on the album. Some of the subject matters on the previous songs on Meter's Murder are quite dour, but this is the one that explicitly sounds dour and sad. Starting with an acoustic guitar, it sounds like it might be a very close and intimate song. You can hear every movement of Johnny's fingers as he plays this very close-mic'd instrument. And then this is smashed by the drums, thundering into the track, along with the bass by Andy, which has this really nice full tone to it.
Park the car at the side of the road. You should know.
He does play with a pick, which kind of gives it this twang. Usually you use a pick to get this twangy sound rather than a funky or human feeling, but I feel like the plucky bass has always suited the Smiths sound. After all the instrumentations come in, the bass is the only instrument without mountains of reverb on top of it. This bass sort of acts like an anchor, even for the drums, which are just slathered with the stuff. It's usually rare for a bass like this to have too much reverb on it anyway. It really does muddy up the mix. The guitar work is relatively simple from Johnny, as he does take a little bit of a back seat compared to Andy's bass, which is definitely here as well, the lead instrument. As the song develops, it gets a little bit more complex too, especially in the breakdown as Johnny's guitar sort of takes over the entire mix, with lots of swirls just panned all over the mix, repeating with a delay. It feels like the guitar is getting closer and closer to your ears as each repeat delay plays. Morrissey at the ending is just crying out as this feedback is just playing throughout the entire mix, just panning left and right. I don't know if it's a sustainer or an ebow, or perhaps just some simple guitar feedback, but it's this really nice sharp sound that just pierces the rest of the mix. It also has this really weird fake out, which to be honest, I don't exactly know why they did this. It is definitely intentional, but it sounds quite odd to me. I would have preferred it if they just played the song out normally, but there you go. I suppose it makes things a little bit different. I haven't mentioned the lyrics yet on this song, which I'll quickly delve into. But the lyrics are definitely the most morbid so far. It almost feels like a sequel to What She Said. Dealing with a suicidal person, it's like Morrissey is now feeling what the girl felt. It seems to deal with someone almost telling their friend not to make fun of someone when they're down. But there's a weird, odd refrain in there where he kind of wishes he could laugh and see the funny side of it all, kind of realizing that it's kind of an odd thing to say after taking the moral high ground in this situation. It could also highlight the fact that this person is a bit of a hypocrite. And by the end of the song, where he's singing, "I've seen this happen in other people's lives, now it's happening in mine," maybe it shows that he is getting a taste of his own medicine, or maybe him just sitting back and watching this thing happen means that his friends have now turned on him, kind of highlighting the difficulty with getting out of a bullying friend group. If you're not bullying someone, it might jump to you. At least that's my interpretation, which I think goes well after the song What She Said. Next is the song Nowhere Fast. It starts with this repeated lick on the guitar by Johnny that usually indicates the start of a verse throughout the entire song, accentuated by the bass and drum hits too. Morrissey talks in poems about his youth even more. He gives us stances that are anti-monarchy and anti-rich. He gives us stances about how old and desolate his town is. I really like the lyric, "Each household appliance is like a new science in my town." It's about being stuck, going nowhere fast. Stuck in the same old town where nothing changes. Not really feeling anything in particular. It continues an almost downward spiral type arc if you imagine this is the same character from What She Said and that joke isn't funny anymore. It's definitely not a concept album, but it carries through this line of being affected deeply by your surroundings where you grew up. Especially the lyrics here. It's an odd bleakness which kind of makes being stationary seem even worse than just being sad. When I'm lying in my bed and I think about life and I think about death, and neither one particularly appeals to me. It's just stuck, not wanting to die, wanting to improve life, but the surroundings around you just give you no opportunities. Manchester in the 80s was a pretty bleak period there. Not to go into politics or anything like that, but it wasn't exactly the most opportune place to be if you were working class. I imagine people still resonate with this message to this day, actually. The music, though, is very upbeat, which kind of continues a pattern in this album, actually. All of the songs that are pretty miserable, song subject-wise, are actually very upbeat and almost danceable, from the bass playing and the guitar work from Johnny. I'm not exactly the most well-versed when it comes to theory, major and minor chords, but I can say that the music does get very sad in some sections, despite its more upbeat nature. Especially this little moment here, where he does this bend and uses his whammy bar, which just produces this whining, sad sound that just rings out. He doesn't use it to do the entire chord, he just does it there to just add this extra crying sound to the guitar. The solo is pretty simple too, kind of based around sliding up and down just one string, and then in the background there's this clapping noise coming from the drums. It turns into this really big marching beat, and then ending with this whammy bar phrase yet again. Oh, it's so good. This is a little bit sad, but the next song is honestly just a proper downer. Well I Wonder comes after this track, and it is just pure misery in the best way possible for the Smiths. Well I Wonder starts with the bass and the guitar playing the exact same notes. I've praised the band quite a bit for not usually doing this, but sometimes when you have a really, really good riff on your hands, it does make sense to just layer it and build up the sounds. It's again another really catchy, great riff that never outstays its welcome. After this riff, it goes just straight into the verses, and you can just hear this really, really sad acoustic chord progression that just goes throughout the entire song. Morrissey doesn't say too much on this song. It's not very wordy, it's very simple, and he does repeat a few lines. But he doesn't always have to be overly poetic and just put as much words down as possible. When the music does a lot of the heavy lifting anyway, we can hear this is a very sad song just by the instrumentation. From the sounds of it, this song is about a broken relationship where someone has moved on and the other one just cannot shake them. And they are so infatuated with this person that they believe that them disappearing from their life is almost equal to them just disappearing from the world altogether. Almost like they are a ghost just haunting this person and just begging them not to forget them. Or maybe this song is literally about someone who has passed on and they are a ghost haunting this person, looking over this person that they can no longer interact with and just wondering if they hear him pass. They say we only truly die when someone last says our name. It could be about someone only existing in someone else's memories. Still alive in one person, gasping, dying, but somehow still alive as this person clings on. This is the fierce last stand of all they are. They are the last proof that this person ever existed. And so the spirit is just pleading with this individual to just keep them in mind so they can continue to live, which would suit the ghostly performance that Morrissey is giving, as well as the reverb on his voice just giving this ethereal and otherworldly effect. It's even more heartbreaking when you get to the ending, and the stoic and low vocal performance from Morrissey just turns into a high-pitched wail, as this person, just grasping on, is finally fading away. And they aren't going quietly, they are crying out in sheer panic, as their fierce last stand ends, just pathetically wailing and pitifully pleading for this person to just hang on to their memory so they don't fade away. It's a perfect example of Morrissey using his falsetto. That is quite a deep interpretation. I don't think Morrissey was going for that. I think he is going at it from the perspective of someone who is just heartbroken that they are no longer in a relationship with someone who they don't want to be forgotten by. I think there's enough evidence in the song to support my interpretation. Morrissey just gives you so much to do with his words. You can just create some out there interpretations and they all sort of sound like they make sense. The music is so good at getting across this depressed nature of the song. Other than that riff, the guitar work by Johnny is just magnificent, especially the ending arpeggios which ring out as the song ends, as the sound of rain just gets louder and louder and louder. Again, that dull, flat snare is still in this song as well, illustrating a depressing song. Again, it just works. It sounds depressing, so it works for a sad song. Also, I just can't get over how amazing that riff is as well, especially when accompanied by these slow strums by the acoustic guitar. But there is something else in this song as well. It's not as simple with its instrumentation, especially with Johnny's guitar work, as well as the slow acoustic strums and this just amazing riff which sounds almost electronic and robotic. Just listen in the background, there is this tremolo-like effect, like they've removed the sound of Johnny plucking the guitar and it's just the sound of the strings afterwards slowly getting louder and louder and louder, shimmering, shining through the entire mix. It sounds so sweet on your ears. A very sad song, although this leads into one of the funkiest songs on the entire album and my favourite song by the Smiths. It's the song I introduce all of my friends to the Smiths with, and that is Barbarism Begins at Home. You want to know how different this song's vibe is compared to the previous song? Well, just listen to that cowbell. You know, it might seem a bit weird to go from one of the most depressing songs in the Smiths' entire discography to one of the funkiest ones, and to be honest, yes, it is a very questionable transition, but just listen to that bass line. It's pretty much the same pattern throughout the entire song, but Jesus Christ, I can't get it out of my head. Seriously though, this is one of the greatest bass lines. I have no idea why it isn't included in any of the best bass lines ever lists that I see. Maybe it's because Johnny is also firing on all cylinders, so he kind of takes a little bit of the spotlight. But even though Andy is playing the exact same bass line throughout the entire 6-minute song with little variation, it just acts as this massive glue that just sticks, along with the drums that just keep this funky upbeat feeling throughout the entire track, whilst Johnny just goes through so many different guitar techniques. He's doing a disco-like strumming pattern in the background, and he's also playing on the acoustic guitar, strumming through the entire song as well. There's fast licks, there's hammer-ons, there's big strums that are just covered in reverb. He does the whole shebang here. And whilst he experiments with all these different unique sounds and fast playing styles, there is Andy and Mike keeping the funky feeling of the song throughout the entire 6-minute runtime. My favourite part of the entirety of Johnny's playing is the second half of the main riff, where he plays this open string and quickly runs all the way up the fretboard to make the sliding effect. It's such an intricate and annoying riff to replicate, but it just sounds so bloody good. Morrissey is on top form with his lyrics. I'm not usually a fan of his random grunts, but this barking noise that he does and yelps kind of illustrates this barbarism that he is talking about. Just a complete lack of culture illustrated by this barking like a dog. It's a very, very simple song about a child abuser, and the entire song is just about the hypocrisy of these apparently cultured adults claiming barbarism of the students when they are the ones acting like dogs and hitting the children. It pretty much repeats the same line throughout the entire song, but Morrissey sings it in different ways, especially at the end where he really gets as much as he can out of the words. I mentioned the drums as well, which carry through this kind of happy upbeat nature, especially with the use of cowbell as well. As well as the cowbell, it also has some other interesting sounds with the percussion, like the hi-hat lifting up, which almost sounds like ripping paper. Just listen to it in the middle of the mix. Each instrument is just fought out so perfectly and just make this amazing funky song. And with a bass line that catchy, there's no way they wouldn't give it a solo, as Johnny's guitar work finally stops and all you are left with is the drums and the bass to play us out. The album is about youth and growing up, and all of the experiences that Morrissey has had growing up in his town. Issues with relationships, days at the fair that have gone completely wrong, suicide, and a state of just being static and stuck in a town whilst time passes you by. It's a great ending song that sort of acts as a full circle to the Headmaster's Ritual. This song sounds pretty similar in tone and feel to the Headmaster's Ritual, the intro, and so there's an interesting link there that maybe this song is from the Headmaster's point of view. A crack on the head is just what you get for not asking, and a crack on the head is just what you get for asking. Kind of putting the children in a lose-lose situation and just being an absolute bastard, or, as displayed by Morrissey's yelps, barking belligerent dogs. And so this sounds like it would be a pretty good album closer. It has a really nice vibe to it, links with the themes of the album. Sounds like a perfect album closer. Although, this is not where the album ends. In fact, Barbarism Begins at Home is the penultimate song, as you probably all know. But I need to talk about the song that ends off this entire album. The very controversial song, mixed amongst all the Smiths fans, Meat is Murder. It's clear to see that Meat is Murder is not a song I am particularly fond of, as I've pretty much hyped it up as the reason why this album isn't number one for me. But let's just talk about it from the beginning like I would any other song. Firstly, Meat is Murder is the only song I cannot fit thematically with the other songs on this record. Again, it deals with youth and it kind of follows this same theme of growing up on a council house estate in a working class environment. But Meat is Murder is not about youth, it's not about growing up, it's not about relationships or unreceived love, it's not about being lonely like the other themes of the album go through. It's about animal rights. Just like Suffer Little Children, there's not really any clever wordplay in this song. Okay, Savour the Flavour of Murder is a good rhyme. I'll give you that, Morrissey. That's pretty catchy. You know, it's quite clever with some of its rhymes, but it is very blunt. It's death for no reason, and death for no reason is murder. I'm not going to say I dislike the song for the message. I like plenty of songs, some by the Smiths, where I disagree with what Morrissey is saying. But the creative choices makes this song laughable to me, especially as it tries to convey a serious message. Along with these lyrics damning meat-eating, the song plays many sound effects that butcher any profound message the song wanted to make. I just can't take the song seriously when they use low-quality stock sheep and cow sound effects. They are supposed to be shocking and heartbreaking, and maybe in the 80s this might have affected me a little bit. You know, I'm a bit desensitized now after growing up in the noughties with the internet. You know, I've seen many worse things that would lead me to be vegetarian over meat is murder. But anyways, I just can't take this song seriously with these disembodied moos and slaughterhouse noises. Which is a shame, because remove those god-awful low-quality sound effects and I don't think it loses any of its bite. And the instrumental for this track is so good. It makes me so disappointed that these crappy sound effects are just smothered over this amazing instrumental from the band. There's this haunting piano that's just reversed, and it just slowly sneaks up on you. It sounds like it's about to blow your speakers and then just suddenly stops. And then the drums are of course covered with reverb, accompanied by a flat snare drum. As we learnt, that always creates a dour atmosphere. And the bass just plodding along works really well with the guitar. Musically, this sounds amazing, but then you just get these really overthought, crappy stock sound effects just playing all over the song. But that isn't the only issue with the song. I do have issue with Morrissey's lyrics. Lyrically, this is weak from Morrissey. The lyrics sound like Peter tweets read out loud. It's that self-righteous activism that shoots movements in the foot, and it just has none of Morrissey's wit or ire. Even in the performance on the actual song, Morrissey sounds defeated. He doesn't sound passionate or angry, which I think would have suited this song better.
It's death for no reason, and death for no reason is murder.
It isn't the message. That's not my issue with this song. It is the way the Smiths try to convey this message and deliver it. And as it is the last song on the album, the lasting impression I get of this album is just... God damn it, why couldn't it have ended with Barbarism Begins at Home? And so that's the reason why I have ranked this album at number 2. You see, the most important songs on an album are the first track and the ending track. The first track kind of gets you in the mood for the album and sort of excites you towards it. It's supposed to grab you to go, oh, I need to listen to all of this. And the ending song is what gives you the lasting impression. If it ended on Barbarism Begins at Home, I think I might have ranked this at number 1. You just come off the record just thinking, oh my god, that was amazing. 8 songs, perfect length, all diverse in their sounds, all having the same theme. That's brilliant. Great album. Cohesive. It's great. And then Meat is Murder is just tacked on the end, which just sounds really out of place. Especially the whiplash of going from Well I Wonder to Barbarism Begins at Home to Meat is Murder. The tone is just horrible at the end of this album. I don't dislike this song because of the message. It's just all of the production work and stock sound effects that just spoil it for me, as well as being way too long. This song did not need to be nearly 7 minutes long. It just drags and it takes ages to get going. Sorry for going on in this song quite a bit, but it just spoils it for me, unfortunately. To be honest, I think they probably should have just released this as a single. I think it would have done a bang-up job of being provocative on its own right as a single, and it wouldn't have sabotaged this album. But I'm not a member of the Smiths. It's their message to do with whatever they like with. And with Meter's Murder reviewed, there is only one other album that could be number one, which is number one, The Queen is Dead. Every song is great, all 10 of them. It starts with the title track, The Queen is Dead, with loads of sarcasm and irony put in for good measure by Morrissey. It is no secret that Morrissey isn't exactly too fond of the monarchy in the UK, but he really goes for the jugular here. Even the press as well, and this overall mysticism with them. Her very lowness with her head in a sling, I'm truly sorry, but it sounds like a wonderful thing. Firstly, the pettiness of just calling Her Highness her lowness is so childish, but it suits the song and Morrissey just perfectly. It's so petty. And then just having her head in a sling. Again, it's not a violent crime, it's not calling for her murder. It's just so childish. But Morrissey is aware of his nature as well. The reason why I really like The Queen is Dead as well is that it's so funny. It's just jam-packed with these humorous lines from Morrissey, where he knows that he's being a bit ridiculous and he just plays into it. In one of the few verses, he breaks into the palace with a sponge and a rusty spanner, and Her Majesty says, "I know you and you cannot sing," and Morrissey retorts, "That's nothing, you should hear me play piano." It's funny. It's kind of easy to poke fun at the royal family nowadays, no one really bats an eye, but in the 80s and the 70s, they were definitely far more revered than they are today. Even having an album called The Queen is Dead straight after one called Meter's Murder, they were definitely counterculture back then, and very controversial. But it's not just hating the Queen. I don't think Morrissey hates any of the individuals in the royal family, at least maybe not when he wrote this. But he seems to go after the mysticism and the tabloids of the UK as well. He pokes fun at the fact that Charles is always in the shadows and name drops the Daily Mail, a infamous tabloid in the UK. It's just an overall dig at the monarchy and the tabloids and just kind of being sick with this massive media hype around the royalty. You've probably seen in the news this stuff is still going on and it seemed to have infected America now. Unlucky Yanks, you get to hear about all this bollocks now too. The Smiths' lyrical content has aged incredibly well. I mean, these same issues that Morrissey is talking about, you know, the royals and the media frenzy surrounding them is still alive and kicking today. More so than ever, I'd say, actually. Anyways, even if you're a fan of the monarchy or not, these lyrics here are just really funny. Morrissey just has a way with his words that just seems so tongue-in-cheek and in jest. Or extremely vicious, it depends on his lines. To be honest, even though I disagree with quite a few of Morrissey's opinions, there's just an interesting quality to them. They're just very entertaining the way he just overtly over-explains things in the most wordy and pretentious ways possible. He might just be one of the funniest lyricists out there as well, even though he doesn't officially do comedy. Musically, this song is a riot too. 6 minutes of Morrissey going on a rant about the monarchy and the media frenzy surrounding them is accompanied by the cutthroat guitar work of Johnny, who at this point just goes completely mad with his guitar playing, with this really sharp and aggressive tone on his guitar. I have no real idea what notes he's playing. It sounds jagged, it sounds aggressive. It's really messy playing, actually. It's hard to actually figure out the notes he is playing. But it just creates this harsh racket that's just panned left. Along with the snappy drum work by Mike and the steady bass from Andy, you just have this great groundwork for Morrissey to just rant on top of. I can also hear a slight synth adding some resonance every so often as well. It could be some guitar feedback panned to the right, but there's definitely some more instrumentation there. This was just before Strange Ways, and it's clear to see that Johnny is getting a little bit more experimental with his instrumentation. The ending, though, is particularly good, though, with Andy and Johnny just going mad on their respective instruments, accompanied by the loud thundering drumming of Mike, as this sweltering feedback just kind of spreads around the entire mix after Morrissey just slowly fades out. it's nice to see Johnny escape the box of the indie jangly guitar darling with something a bit more aggressive and edgy. Definitely his most aggressive track thus far. Next continues the humour of the album with the song Frankly Mr. Shankly, the funniest song on the album. It seems like a sarcastic summary of Morrissey's fame so far and where he wants to go with it. I see Frankly Mr. Shankly as a parody of fame-hungry celebrities, knowing full well how vapid and empty celebrity lives are and still wanting to achieve that life rather than being righteous or holy any day, any day, any day. He's just summarising these empty celebrities which probably started to come to rise during the 80s. And again, it seems more prophetic than ever with empty, vapid celebrities being in the news every single day. Just the way he summarises these characters as well is just on another level. It's just such an interesting and funny subject matter. And just listening to all of the different ways that Morrissey has to deal with this record executive or dealing with his hunger for fame is just so funny. This album's theme actually goes through fame quite a bit, actually. I know Strange Ways touched on it a little bit too with Paint a Vulgar Picture, but it does it in far more of a tongue-in-cheek way on this album. And Morrissey is just far more playful on this entire album. He just knows full well that this fame is corroding his soul, but he doesn't care. He just wants to be famous. He wants his face everywhere, as is the view of many celebrities. The music helps this whimsical and tongue-in-cheek nature too, having this really bouncy bass line that just sticks in your head. And the interplay between Andy and Johnny really shows here how great Johnny and Andy work together to make in music what Morrissey is trying to get across in lyrics. Along with the stabby bass line, Johnny is playing these quick little up strums on each chord, which just creates this space in between each note, which makes it sound like the melody is just hopping.
Frankly, Mr. Shankly, this position I've held.
Along with that steady kick drum just going constantly, it just sounds really wacky and whimsical. And each phrase ends with this really nice wrung out strum by Johnny as the bass guitar gets lower and lower and lower. The bouncing riff continues as the song develops, as Johnny plays some delayed and quickly changing licks on the left as it goes through each verse, and they're just so catchy.
Frankly, Mr. Shankly, I'm a sickening wreck.
And then after these catchy little stabby notes, it goes into sort of like a instrumental chorus, where the guitar just takes over the entire track. It's a bit more jangly on this chorus here, and it's reminiscent of some stuff off of Meter's Murder. But just having this chorus again that just has tons and tons of effects, and then going straight back to the verses, which kind of cuts back the reverb by quite a bit. And the layers that Johnny adds on are just removed and added back on. I've never really stated that Johnny's guitar work is ever overbearing. He's really good at just placing his notes extremely well throughout the entire song, to suit it as best he can. Great song. So it's been very happy so far, and now that will be replaced by probably one of the most sincere songs on the album. I Know It's Over is far more solemn and earnest compared to the majority of the songs on this album. There isn't really an ounce of humour in this song like there is in others. It's definitely played straight here. And what's the one sound that sells a depressing song? That's right, that drum sound with that flat reverb is there too. This time though it's on a rim hit though, and it really just rings out throughout the entire song. It just sets up this introspective atmosphere. I need to nick it actually if I ever write anything. It actually starts with Morrissey's vocals first though, before we hear this drum hit. A quick oh before he goes into Mother. I can feel the soil falling over my head. This song is about a relationship that never happened. The I Know It's Over is almost poking fun at the fact that they themselves have never started this relationship. I know it's over and it never really began. It's a very one-sided song, seemingly about the ultimate act of unrequited and unreciprocated romance. It also laments both of their outcomes and pretty much equates this person's lack of a relationship with this person they admire with dying. Again, very dramatic in Morrissey fashion, but it's clear to see that this song definitely struck a nerve with quite a few people who are pretty much in the exact same circumstances. If you want to be depressed, just look at the comments section for the song on YouTube. You'll just read some stories that just make you feel really bad. It starts very small with the instrumentation. As I mentioned, there are those rim hits echoed out by the reverb by Mike, and then there's this really nice warm bass from Andy playing at the lower end that just links this track together. There are moments where it's just the bass and the drums, and again it's all about space, this silence that is, it just creates this very isolated feeling, just having this silence in the track. I suppose it makes sense that it feels isolating and lonely because, well, the individual and protagonist of this song is those things. This song just becomes more and more grandiose and larger as the very, very timid vocals of Morrissey get far more expressive, until at the very end he's just crying his heart out. Oh mother, I can feel the soil falling over my head is just repeated over and over and over again. And it is definitely one of Morrissey's best vocal performances. He is putting everything he has into this performance, and his voice has this amazing vibrato to it. It almost takes on an operatic type performance at the end, especially when strings join in into the mix, and where Johnny's electric guitar just jumps onto the mix too with his classic arpeggios. It's as if the character is finally building up the courage to just shout out how they actually feel over the course of the track. And it's this vocal performance and the very, very touching lyrics that make me think this song is just very sincere. It is nowhere near like Girlfriend in a Coma that has these off lyrics or any irony in it. No, this is all played straight. This character is in just pure misery. You can hear his vocals quivering a little bit as well, but Morrissey's voice is just so strong. He knows exactly what he is doing to try and sell this character. Morrissey again kind of flips the narrative onto its head by having a song about simply unreciprocated love turn more into a stinging realization that the character is at fault for this. If you're so funny, then why are you on your own tonight? If you're so good looking, why are you on your own tonight? Kind of having a go at this mentality that this person deserves love to be reciprocated from someone who they've never even approached, or perhaps not even having the spine to go up and actually ask someone. They're in this situation because they never acted on any situations. They've got no one to blame but themselves. It's so easy to laugh, it's so easy to hate. It takes guts to be gentle and kind. Realizing that maybe this protagonist isn't as squeaky clean as they think. And I love the fact that he always brings back in over at the end of most of these verses, kind of cementing the fact that this person has given up already and nothing's really getting through to them. It also goes to serve that this character is a bit pompous as well, equating having this love not reciprocated as just dying and feeling the soil fall over their head. It's a really poetic phrase, you know, mother, I can feel the soil falling over my head. Like, I can feel death approaching, I can see it coming, it's already there for me, I can feel it. There is some nice developments in the instrumentation. I love the synth strings that come in to help emphasize this big grandiose sound in the second half.
And why are you on your own tonight?
And Johnny's electric guitar having this climbing melody on the arpeggios just sounds so amazing, especially with the crones of Morrissey at the end of the track. It's a really good song. And again, there's so much lyrical depth here, you can spend ages interpreting it, which I pretty much have. You know, it's funny, I don't really describe myself as much of a lyric person, but there's something about Morrissey's poetry and lyrics that always allows me to read into them. This song is amazing, although unfortunately, one of the small issues I have with The Queen is Dead is the lead-in to the next song, Never Had No One Ever. After the very solemn song and honest song, I Know It's Over, It is unfortunately undercut by the next song, which goes for a similar gloomy feeling, but it doesn't go over as well. It seems like it's trying to capture the same atmosphere with this bigger stringed orchestral sound, but it just can't beat the belter that Morrissey just put out previously. Never Had No One Ever is a good song, and maybe in another track list, rearranged, it would be fine, but it just doesn't feel as effective when After I Know It's Over. I can't get too much from the lyrics in this song actually. There isn't as much poetry to look into in depth when compared to the others, and the instrumentation kind of feels samey to I Know It's Over, so it just feels weaker. The performances are spectacular. Johnny's guitar work is amazing. The strings sound really nice on your ears. There's some interesting work with the production and instrumentation, like this echoing, wailing whistle that comes in every so often. I'm not sure what that bell noise is either, but that adds a lot to the overly dramatic atmosphere too. Compared to the sincere song I Know It's Over, it's kind of like a different version of it, but this time the sarcastic nature of Morrissey's lyrics has come to fruition instead. I do like the country-like twang on Johnny's guitar as well, especially when going into the chorus, I've never had no one ever. It really sticks out amongst these strings and other instrumentation. It's not a bad song. In fact, I really like it. It's a great song. It sounds amazing. I love Johnny's guitar. I love the bass. I love Morrissey's vocals. And the weird bell instruments in there. It sounds amazing. But coming straight after I Know It's Over, it just doesn't flow very well. Next, the album returns to a much happier sound. A song about life and death, and the media press in the UK having a go at Morrissey for nicking lines from old films and books. It's again a song that only Morrissey could write the lyrics about. He takes lines here and there from literature and old films, and a lot of people in the media press do call him out for it, only for Morrissey to attack the absolute absurd nature of these gotcha moments. It's another moment where the Smiths accidentally are prophetic too, as it reminds me of the discourse on social media, especially with the media currently just kind of attacking people over the smallest detail. His lyrics here go by very quickly and displays his quick wit. It's a sunny day, so let's go where we're wanted. I'll meet you at the cemetery gates. It just occurred to me that that simple phrase, go where we're wanted, it's just a subtle way of saying, yeah, the music press want us to die. They want our blood. They're so rabid, they just want us to just disappear. It's extremely exaggerated and just playfully poking fun at the media machine. And it goes to further the theme as well as being just dissatisfied with fame and the music press, like it did on Frankly Mr. Shankly. There's always someone somewhere with a big nose who knows and trips you up and laughs when you fall. It's just kind of poking out media for having these gotcha moments and headlines, just trying to trip up artists and laugh at them instead of doing productive things. And then pointing out that some of the reused phrases that he uses have been reused by many over hundreds of years, and then produce the text from whence was ripped some dizzy whore 1804. Oh, it's just a funny song. Marr and co do a wonderful job as well at portraying this lyrical feeling of Morrissey just playfully making fun of the media. From the dark song of I Know It's Over and the overly dramatic Never Had No One Ever, this very quaint sounding song with these happy jolly acoustic guitars just panned left and right just makes this very happy vibe, similar to Girlfriend in a Coma and Shiny Happy People. I want to highlight Mike Joyce as well. His playing here is just really great and highlights what he's good at. He knows exactly where to place his fills and his hits. His small snare and marching beat adds a lot to the song and the build-up of the song to the choruses. Just having these little moments before Morrissey goes into the chorus, he just is so good at making these little fills that just hype up the rest of the track. I've spoken a lot about how playing fast isn't necessarily a sign of a good player. Definitely an identifiable trait from one, especially if they're playing accurately. Sometimes it's knowing how much to add and how much to leave out that really separates the players from the great players. And Mike Joyce always serves the song in the same way Ringo does. His drum works are never overbearing. I've never thought, maybe the drummer could, ease up a little bit. He's kind of stealing the limelight from the singer. I just never get that impression. The only one that really seems to hog the limelight is Morrissey, and that's completely acceptable. He is the front man, and it is his words that are creating this profound effect on the listener. Anyways, it's a great cheery song that is sarcastic and just loads of fun. Next is another standout, which is Big Mouth Strikes Again, starting with some really nice chord progression from Johnny on the acoustic guitar, before Mike comes in just smashing the snare as the song gets right into it. Andy's bass is bouncing as usual. Coming to the end of this video, I'm sort of running out of ways to say, wow, Andy's playing a really amazing bouncing bass line here, and Johnny has some amazing arpeggios. I mean, I'm sort of running out of words to say this. But yeah, Andy, Johnny and Mike are just amazing on this song. The song is seemingly talking about a specific individual or just a big mouth in general, maybe someone in Morrissey's life that has particularly pissed him off. You could probably apply this song to quite a few people in real life. He may be drawing from experience here from an annoying person he has dealt with in fame, which again would go well with the theme of the album of dealing with fame. Morrissey's sarcasm is on full display here, clearly showing that he has had enough of this big mouth and is just passively aggressively toying with them. Sweetness, I was only joking when I said I'd like to smash every tooth in your head. This is extremely violent and graphic with what Morrissey is playfully saying to this person that has rubbed him the wrong way. Like he's apologising in the most backhanded way possible to try and avoid the wrath of Big Mouth. Although he ends up incurring the wrath of Big Mouth, which leads to him knowing how Joan of Arc felt, as the flames rose to a Roman nose and the Walkman started to melt. But I think I've heard a more wordy, overly poetic way of just describing being rinsed by someone. And it's just so funny to hear Morrissey equate him getting told off to the same as Joan of Arc burning alive. It's hyperbole, it's done for effect. I also like the progression of this melting of Joan of Arc too, going from the Walkman, which is usually on a hip melting, to the hearing aid, which is at the top of his head. Kind of like he's fanned the flames and now Big Mouth is getting even more cross with him. I know I've kind of said, oh yeah, Johnny has really good arpeggios on like so many songs now, but he feels more comfortable in doing things that weren't in his usual playstyle originally. As I stated, he usually plays within limitations, staying with this jangly sound, no distortion, no shredding or fast playing, but he seems to play a lot faster and more aggressive in this song, especially in the breakdown as Mike is just smashing the drum kit. You can also hear in this section some lovely bass playing from Andy. I don't know how he's playing the bass, but it sounds like slap bass, which just produces this funky sound. Before I go on to the next song, I'll just talk about my favourite section of the song, which is the pre-chorus, where Johnny plays a rockabilly-inspired bend, which is mimicked by Morrissey's backing vocals, like a call and response between them. Then they join in together for the final build-up, going higher and higher, creating this big splash for the chorus to just come thundering in. Now comes the seventh track on the album, The Boy with a Thorn in His Side. I always associate it with the same vibe as Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, a song with a very clean tone from Johnny, sliding up and down, and the riff sounds pretty similar too. The song again could be very simple, a boy who wants to be loved but just pushes everyone away, like, Hedgehog Dilemma, we've seen it in lots of media. The lyrics suit this as well, the boy with a thorn in his side. Behind the hatred, there lies a murderous desire for love. Just kind of someone almost screaming out for affection, but because of their own outward shield, they just will never receive it. Kind of goes pretty well with I Know It's Over as well. Again, there's a lot of linking themes I'm thinking about now after analysing these lyrics. But with Morrissey, as we've seen on countless other songs, with just one twist of a word, he can completely change the meaning of a song. How can they hear me say those words and still they don't believe? Us. Not me, us. And then this makes me think, oh, wait, if this album's dealing with fame, is Morrissey talking to the music press right now? The Smiths had a rough time with some of the press, who called them depressed and pompous teens, as well as sparking other controversies, such as the referenced controversy to do with Reel Around the Fountain and Suffer Little Children on their debut. And the Smiths in this situation would definitely be the boy with the thorn in his side. But despite this hatred thrown down by the Smiths, they still want this affection. And that's what this song portrays. It's about the Smiths wanting for this love from the media press and from the music industry, and they do it through a lovey-dovey teen pop sound, portraying this relationship with the music press like one of the crushes that Morrissey talks about on many of his numerous songs is so absurd and satirical, especially since the music press probably had a go at him for making many songs about this very subject. It's an amazing song subject to just speak about, and it's something that only Morrissey and the Smiths could only really do. I don't think there's any other band that have made a love song about unreciprocated love from the music industry. As mentioned, it is very 50s inspired on the instrumental side, with this classic pop sound emanating from Johnny's guitar. Along with this catchy and jangly acoustic guitar. It's very 50s inspired. It sounds like a pop song from that era made into the frame of a 80s indie rock song. The last minute of the 3-minute song is just Morrissey crying out for love and affection from this music industry, as this bright instrumentation and catchy riff just play us out as the synth strings get more and more complex. Next after this is another very odd song dealing with a humorous subject, simply called Vicar in a Tutu. It's another rockabilly song which, to be honest, have been the weakest additions that I've went through. I wasn't a fan of Death at One's Elbow, but there's something about this song specifically that just feels a lot more fitting. From the title alone, it is very absurd, and it fits the humour of the album too, whilst also making some poignant points. The song of Vicar in a Tutu could possibly be about Morrissey just having fun with life and kind of explaining the point that you shouldn't let others get you down for how you want to act. A vicar in a tutu isn't exactly socially normal, and having one of the priests respond to the vicar, "Christ, get your soul dry cleaned," is again another humorous story for Morrissey to delve into. It's just a fun little story about not letting others decide how you want to act or dress or whatever. I like the drumming a lot in this song. It's constantly driving, and the snare is just moving along the entire rhythm section, and some nice tambourine hits in there, which is a nice change. It does sound like a very loose jam track as well, so these drums do a real good job of just keeping the band in time with a nice beat. Music-wise, it's got those classic rockabilly acoustic guitars panned left and right, just chugging along with muted strings. Although the bass isn't very twangy in this song compared to songs like Rush Home Ruffians, it's quite subdued, it's quite deep and low. And this allows the arpeggios panned right to breathe more and ring out, along with Morrissey's vocals, which has this effect on it, which makes it sound like he is on an old radio in a big empty hall. It's mixed incredibly well too, so all of these subtle sounds and reverbs are just so obvious and nice to listen to. Johnny isn't going too extreme with his playing, and is playing a pretty stereotypical Johnny riff. There is that country twang there which he's used quite a few times, but it's suited here though. It gets a little bit more complex near the end, but nothing too crazy, with Morrissey just shouting out, "I am a living sign," kind of cementing the fact that, hey, do what you want. I mean, I'm living proof of that. I have flowers hanging out of my trousers. And then next, this goes into probably the defining track of the Smiths. And that is There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, the penultimate song of The Queen Is Dead. A favourite of many fans of the Smiths, and probably one of the most popular songs next to This Charming Man. It's one of those songs that will just continue to live on. The chord progression and songwriting is one of Johnny's best. It marks the first song I actually learnt by the Smiths on the acoustic guitar. consisting of some pretty simple chords actually, for Johnny. Although even when using these simple chords, it's never a 4-chord song, there's always some extra variations in there. It's just a great melody that he creates to just build this song around.
Take me out tonight.
The bass pretty much follows the root notes of the guitar for the majority of the song, with some deviations here and there where Andy has a small run on the bass or maybe a hammer on here or there for some variation. The strings though are definitely a standout on this track though, and shine here, screaming on the chorus with Morrissey, countering his deep baritone voice with these high-pitched swells.
Kiss the both of us.
It's funny that one of the most iconic songs by the Smiths doesn't contain the jangly electric guitar that Johnny is known for. I bet Johnny's actually pretty proud of that. Even the title of the song is just iconic. It's one of the greatest titles out there. There is a light that never goes out. It just sounds like an old poem. It just gets into your head and you start to realize, what is the light that never goes out? Where is it? Is it a literal thing that Morrissey is talking about? Maybe it's just metaphorical? Is it a light that will continue to shine even after getting killed by a double-decker bus or a truck? The song could have many interpretations with a title as vague as There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. Maybe it's about someone who just views the world from their window and their light never goes out. Maybe it's about someone longing to go outside, or perhaps it's a lot more metaphorical, as in like a light or a spark in someone's feelings for someone will never go out. The interpretation I jumped to originally was that this song was about someone running away. And the light that never goes out could be the parents keeping an eye out for their son or daughter who has run away, and they are just begging their friend not to drop them home, because it's not my home, it's their home, and I'm welcome no more. The electric guitar is in there as well as the acoustic guitar, but it is panned and only makes itself more apparent in some sections of the song.
And in the dark.
It's mainly the acoustic guitar that shines throughout all of the track. The actual vibe of the song is this odd mix of optimism and dashing hopes. It's a triumphant sounding song, especially with these stringed instrumentations. They sound beautiful. But still, there's just this element of sadness in the song that I just can't shake. It could be uplifting or depressing. It really much depends on when you listen to it and at what stage of your life you listen to it from. Morrissey's performance is great here as well, quivering in his voice when he's telling the person he doesn't care where he goes.
Take me anywhere, don't care, don't care, don't care.
Or perhaps another interpretation is that they just don't want to go home because they don't want to deal with their parents. They just want to hang out with a person in their car. Just being next to them would be a heavenly way to die. It's very sweet actually, it can be a very romantic song. I can see it as a romance song. Morrissey, when he gets this amazing set of poetry down in a song, is just amazing at just having all these phrases which stream together to create a great song, but you can never be entirely sure what exactly he means, and so it's up to the listener to kind of form their own interpretation. And throughout this entire video, you've heard me just come up with loads and loads of interpretations from his lyrics. There Is a Light That Never Goes Out is a classic that affects many today, and it probably is the Smiths' best song and the best song to introduce people to. Even though I do love Barbarism Begins at Home, this is probably the iconic and ideal Smiths song. And just like that, we are on to the last song of the album, which is pretty much the deciding factor for if Meter's Murder or If the Queen Is Dead was going to be top of this list. Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. It's a very odd title for the rest of the themes that the album has gone through. It does kind of fit this humorous nature because it is it's just a strange title. To have this very poetic and wonderful song, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, just juxtaposed with Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. It's a little strange. So, when I first got into the Smiths, I'd say around 10 years ago now, I loved all of The Queen Is Dead. Then I got to the end track, Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. And, well, quite frankly, Mr. Shankly, I thought it was terrible. Just that lyric just kind of threw me off. It sounded really phoned in. Even the intro of it with the really odd fade out that just kind of comes out of nowhere. And coming straight after There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, which just had this profound effect on me. It felt a bit middling, a bit plodding, so I always used to skip it. Then it was around this year actually, I started listening to the Smiths again after a period of listening to other types of music. For some reason, this song just clicked with me instantly. I was obsessed with it for a long while. I just realised, my god, this might be one of Johnny's just best guitar performances. His guitar work is so smooth and so clean on this. It just rings out, and the delay panned left and right, or maybe even overdubs, sounds so good. It's just this amazing full sound. And Andy's bass is really in the low end, and it only makes this twang and picky noise at the very end with this 3-note phrase that just kind of introduces Morrissey to the track. It just sounds heavenly, the song. It just sounds really dreamy. And then Morrissey christened this beautiful, dreamy melody with the name Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. It doesn't seem like a song to comfort girls who struggle with their image, because other than the title Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others, the lyrics don't make too much sense to me. As Antony said to Cleopatra, as he opened a crater veil, "Oh, I say, some girls are bigger than others." But the thing is though, even with these strange lyrics, I have sung them because, oh my god, the melody and singing pattern that Morrissey does over this amazing guitar phrase by Johnny. It's a great ending song. It sounds like an ending song. The lyrics don't almost matter because it's just such a soothing song. And unlike Mita's Murder, there's nothing abrasive in the song that causes me to turn it off. It's a nice, soothing ending. And to be honest, it is a little bit funny. And after the humour of The Queen is Dead, it kind of makes sense to kind of end on this pretty humorous song. The strings are definitely a standout on this album as well. Every time they're made apparent, they just sound so good and just enhance what is ever there. The strings definitely stand out here too. Of course, they just go hand in hand with Morrissey's baritone vocals. But other than the lyrics, everything else about this song is just amazing. The sweet production is great on it, the strings just swirl around the mix and just sound beautiful. The bass playing and drums are just as tight and steady as they've been throughout their entire discography. It's just a really great ending song. And so, when comparing all of these albums together, The Queen is Dead just has such quality writing, and both the intro song and the ending song leave me satisfied after a listen. It's a really nice cohesive listening experience, and it's definitely the funniest album out of the Smiths' entire discography. But honestly, as I've stated numerous times, if you pick up an album by the Smiths, you really can't go wrong. Well, to be honest, I don't really like the live album because, you know, the vocal noises. But yeah, just like that, those are the 4 studio albums of the Smiths ranked. This took way too long to do. Thank you for watching, and I'm interested to see the opinions on the Smiths here, because I feel like more than any other band, this list is probably the most subjective I've had to do. There's many personal reasons why I have done this ranking. I'm very interested to see what is commonly seen as the #1 ranked album. I am pretty sure it is The Queen is Dead, although I have no idea what people consider the worst actually, because, like I said, all of their albums are amazing. But bloody hell, they only had like 4 albums and 2 compilation albums, and Jesus, there's like only 1 terrible song in their entire discography, and that's Golden Lights. And that's a B-side, it's not on any of these albums here. Truly one of the greatest bands to come out of the UK. And highly influential and just so enjoyable for so many different moods. You can listen to them when you're sad, you can listen to them when you're happy, or a bit sarcastic. Just a great band, and I'll stop gushing about them now, otherwise this video will be even longer than it is. Anyways, let me know your ranking. I'm interested to see what people put at last and first. And thank you for watching. If you liked this ranking series, you might like my one by Radiohead, which should be on my channel in the playlist. If not, I'll put it in the description. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. See ya.